And we're live.
Call the meeting to order. Welcome to the regular board meeting in the Valley Irrigation District, February 12th, 2021. Bill 20, what?
February 10th.
10th?
10th.
What did I say?
12.
12, sorry. Already messed up. Okay. If you'll all join me with a pledge of allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, one note on the agenda this morning, we'll be switching the position on General Order number 2 and number 3. Just reverse those for staff consideration.
Oh, good.
And with that, we have special orders, recognition of employees.
Okay, I'll be making the presentation here. Good morning, board, staff who are listening, and public. Greg Jones, Interim General Manager. So twice a year we bring forth to the board a recognition of sort of milestone years for staff. This year we have a series of staff who have been here from a 10-year milestone up to a 30-year milestone. And this is their hire date. It's kind of, we're looking in arrears. This is from July to December of 2020. We'll do this again as a recognition in July, or more like August probably, for the 2020. So we look at it backwards, that 6-month window. We've got these staff ranging from 30 years to 10 years, as I have said. In the past, we've brought those staff members into the board, and their supervisor or direct manager would say a little bit about them. Because of COVID, obviously, we've truncated it to making sure that you see their photograph. So if you see them in the field or in the office or anywhere around, they're at least recognizable. I don't have a lot of information about each one of them, and so we're just going to kind of go through, and I'll read off their names and their titles, but off the bat, just universally and around the horn, every one of these individuals has been and dedicated much of their career and their life, honestly, to NID, and it's just exciting to be, part of an organization that has such longevity and has such dedication from our staff. So each one of them deserve that, and they deserve your recognition. They'll be receiving a small plaque and a small certificate with their years of recognition. So we want to appreciate them. First off, on the 30 years, we have Greg Cornejo. He is our electrical systems technician 2, started in September of 1990. Wade Townsend has been with us for 25 years, and he's a senior survey technician, started in 1995. Next, please. Oh, boy. That's right. Oh, don't put too far. I did it too. Okay. Chris Friedman. Our equipment operator, started with us in 2000. Nancy Altrand, our financial analyst. She's been with us also since 2000. And Matthew Crow. He is our senior right-of-way agent, works downstairs in 2000 as well, celebrating 20 years. Thank you to them. Rich McConaughey, vegetation control worker 2. Rich has been with us since 2005. And again, Troy Texera, senior storekeeper. He's been with us since 2005. So appreciate their work for 15 years to the district. Additional 15 years, Tanya Herrera, senior engineer, been with us since 2005, as well as Dean Hunt, our all things GIS and mapping since 2005. So appreciate their service to the community and with the district. Finally, Robert Granholm, hydroelectric maintenance tech 2, been with us since 2010, and Tina Conkle, our hydroelectric compliance tech 2, has been with appreciate their service and years of dedication to the district. So, with that, I just want to offer that to the board, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Greg, and thank you to all the staff members that were recognized this morning. We appreciate your service and commitment to NID, and we all benefit from that. Okay, at this time, we'll take public comment on any items not on the agenda. If you'd like to comment this morning, press *9 to raise your hand, and we will see if we have somebody. Looks like we have Jeff Litton. Go ahead, Jeff.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
I'd just like to comment, begin to acknowledge that I'm speaking today from traditional Nisenan Native American land. I would like the NID board to vote to stop the Centennial Dam project because it is not in the best interest of our community or our neighboring water district, South Sutter Water District. Furthermore, 24 families would lose their homes, be demolished behind and flooded behind the dam. What if that was your home? South Sutter Water District has filed a petition against Centennial Dam because the dam does not measure how much extra water there is in the watershed. It only looks at how much can be legally stolen from farmers downstream. 43,000 acres of agriculture are managed by the farmers using Bear River water, much of that coming from the Yuba River. I've spent hours photographing their public records and calculating the data to see what happens if NID is allowed to divert 221,400 acre feet of water out of the Bear River as intended. Those farmers would have been shorted 13 of the previous 18 years, so only 5 out of 18 years was there enough water for NID's vision for Centennial Dam of over-allocating Bear River beyond sustainability. Past NID dammer, Scott Miller, said he would continue to take those farmers to court to ensure that he can keep having surplus water to sell to new developers on the valley floor. It's now known reservoirs release methane into the environment, which is 10 times more effective at warming our planet than carbon dioxide. California's climate is changing. Do we want to make it worse with Centennial Dam or keep sequestering carbon dioxide through an 8.5 miles of thriving forest that exists currently? Nevada Irrigation District is entering into an age of moral recovery and hopefully away from the practice of placing non-disclosure agreements on our fellow citizens, and hopefully to stop reading the emails sent to their board members. That is an invasion of privacy, and that really needs to be stopped. 800,000 people visited the Yuba River last year because our rivers are an open-air cathedral where we all go to celebrate. We are river people, yet Centennial Dam would flood our Bear River crossing, the Bear River campground, and 8.5 miles that people access for hiking, tubing, rafting, kayaking, fishing, gold panning, and much more. Let us move into an era where we can protect our rivers, our families, our heritage, our culture, our agriculture, and our changing climate. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Litton. Let's see, you have a phone number with a hand raised.
1166.
Ending in 1166. Go ahead.
Press *6 to unmute.
*6 or *9?
Unmute, *6.
Oh, *6 to unmute. Go ahead, phone number ending in 1166.
There we go.
Oh, there we go.
Yes, hello. My name is Casey Gansky. I represent the Countryside Water Association in South Nevada County. I had 2 items that I wanted to bring to the board today. The first, I wanted to mention support of the Centennial Dam for users within Nevada County. It's a very important resource which we all need, and I'm very much in support of that. The second item I wanted to bring up was I spoke with NID earlier in the month, or last month, I should say, and there was some information regarding when the board may vote on drought conditions, and I believe that's this meeting. I don't know if it's on the agenda or not. If it's not, I was hoping somebody could comment on that to give information on how allocations would essentially be affected if it were to go into effect.
Thank you. Would you repeat your name, sir? We didn't get it.
My name is Casey Gansky.
Casey. Thank you very much, Casey.
Thank you.
Anybody else, star 9 to speak on items not on the agenda this morning? One last chance. Seeing none? Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to the consent agenda. One item. Do I have a motion?
I'll move
the consent agenda.
Second.
Moved by Director Heck, seconded by Director Johansson. Those two don't need discussion. Madam Secretary, would you call the roll, please?
Division 5,
Yes.
Division 4. Aye. Division 3. Aye. Division 1.
Aye.
Division 2.
Aye. Thank you very much. All right, so we switched the two items, so we're gonna pick up on general orders number 3, I believe, correct? And Jana is here for that. Good morning, Jana, how are you?
Good morning. Good morning, Board. I have a staff report here, which was in an open item agenda from the Administrative Practices Committee from last week regarding updates to the board policy for holidays. We wanted a slight change, recommended a slight change to the policy to account for holidays, which generally every 7 years this might occur when we are unable to follow the policies of an observed holiday. Generally, holidays that occur on a Saturday, we observe on a Friday, and holidays that would occur on a Sunday, we observe the district holiday on the Monday. However, for this year's calendar, we are in a bit of an overage, which would cause one less holiday for the next calendar year. And so both our board policy and the MOUs for the represented units require that we offer a certain number of hours and days of holidays plus the flex holidays. So we suggested a slight change in the first policy that you see here, which was in the definition of an observed holidays is we just put in generally, and that's usually our rule of thumb. Our observation is thus remains the same. However, to account for this sometimes every 7 years occurrence, we say an observed holiday will be observed in the year that it occurs, because that allows us to make sure we are standard with the holidays as per policy and as per our MOUs. Bless you.
Allergies.
There was some requests of the committee for additional information about other agencies and how they might handle it, and what they do with their policies. We had, done a little bit of research before presenting it to APC on this, and we did some more. But other comparable county, city, water agencies vary on the observed holiday. Most do follow our observed holiday rule, the Saturday, Friday, and then the Sunday, Monday rule. We've even reached out, I even reached out personally to some of my HR colleagues at other agencies, and some said, yeah, we're just doing it this way, or we're doing it that way. They're not restricted in their policies. They can designate and adjust their holiday schedules. Some do have when they encounter this, do have sort of a bank or holiday credit if this occurs. Or they require their staff to utilize a floating holiday to observe the holiday. Again, there's not necessarily consistency on the state or even federal level, or a requirement by any private or public sector agency or company that we know to actually give paid holidays. But generally, most all, of course, provide holidays. Ours are 11. We budget for 11 and the 2 floating holidays per calendar year for employees in our budget and expenses. We already met and conferred with AFSCME about this minor change because we are required to do that with them when we have any board policy changes if it affects the terms and conditions of their employment. They did understand and agreed to of these changes, that this makes sense, and also agreed that when it comes time to deal with the labor negotiations and the non-economic cleanup items in the MOUs, that they would mirror this. And usually, when it comes to these types of policies, the MOUs and our board policies are almost word for word, and they're included here for you to look at. There was a request to consider an alternate draft and be more specific about this situation. So I did draft, we did draft and put this forth for, the board's consideration and discussion, which is the alternate definition of observed holidays. So instead of the generally and observe in the calendar year that it occurs, we've created some language that, again, if a holiday falls on a Saturday, cannot be observed in the preceding Friday due to it not being in the calendar year, it shall be observed on a Monday. In all cases, hours and number of observed holidays and floating holidays shall be available to eligible employees commensurate with this policy and utilized from January 1st to the December 31st of each calendar year. So, if there's any questions about the 2 types of languages or any other information I've got here, I'm happy to answer.
Can I chime in now? So I was the one that had the concerns about this.
Director Peters, go ahead.
So on this, the main thing I wanted to point out, it's the Administrative Practices Committee, I had suggested that in lieu of just saying an observed holiday will be observed in the year that it occurs, I had suggested that we put in the language, which is actually in the staff report, that says, if the New Year's Day holiday falls on a Saturday, it shall be observed on the following Monday. That's what I had asked as alternative language, rather than it should be observed in the year that it occurs. And I don't know where all of this other language came from, but I did not request this alternate language as it's written here. And also, I just wanted to make a clarification that the state of California, it says that in the staff report that the state of California holiday is consistent with the holidays we observe. But when the state of California has a holiday, it says, when a holiday falls on a Saturday, employees shall receive holiday credit. And so it's not that it falls on a Friday or, so just a clarification on when the state of California and the Nevada County Superior Court observes the state of California policy, which is holiday credit. So my proposal is that rather than just saying it shall occur in the year that the holiday should be observed in the year that it occurs, I would prefer to say if the New Year's holiday falls on a Saturday, it shall be observed on the following Monday. That was the request I had made at ACC and what drove it to come to this board. I just wanted to clarify to be more specific on when the holiday would be taken if it falls on a Saturday, this 1-7-year current. So my proposal is that we modify section 2030, policy 2030.6 to state that if the New Year's holiday falls on a Saturday, it shall be observed on the following Monday.
So you're simplifying it.
That's what I wanted to do, is simplify it and specify it. That was my whole point.
Yeah, the point was to simplify it, okay. Director Johansson?
No,
I guess that's
Janet, does that,
earlier.
well, does that work for you?
It's not up to me, it's up to the board.
I understand that, but does it work? I mean, does that fit within?
Simplifying it works.
That's fine, we can write it that way if you want. I would need to bring this back to the board. And before the board back to ask me. Before it comes back.
Why don't you expand on that, how you've met and conferred with the language, the initial draft language, but you have not with alternate.
Correct. Alternate language, even though it's generally the same thing, we need to submit to AFSCME to say, look, we know you agree to that. If the board, wants to change it, here is the new language for the policy. Do you agree? And hopefully they'll agree. I don't think they'll have an issue with it, but that will be through the next cycle of approvals, committee, et cetera.
Director Hull.
Thank you, Chris. Personally, I find the language that was originally written is clear in my mind. An observed holiday, and we have the list of observed holidays will be observed in the year that it occurs. To me, that is clear. So I don't really understand the nuance here, so that I just offer that. I would be fine with the language that was originally drafted. Because if it's an observed holiday, here are the lists, and it says will be observed in the year that it occurs, so it's clear.
Does that mean we could declare February 10th New Year's Day?
I'm just saying that the district identifies what day. You also have in here that the day that, don't you have that Saturday's gonna be observed? I mean, I think that's kind of ludicrous, to be honest. I just think it's, I think in practice, I think there's a difference between policy and practice sometimes. And practice is how you operationalize something. And to me, policy cannot, generally speaking, policy does not address every single nuance of occurrence.
Right.
And so it's up to the district, in combination with union conversations, to operationalize things. And to me, this hasn't been an issue, so I would think that this just clarifies it, and to me, that it is clear. It just, that's just me. I'm not saying for anybody else.
Well, we have cleared it with the union, so I think with the union's case, it seems clear. Now it's just a matter of determining what's the correct language. If the language wants to go to more specific, Director Peters' interest of changing the language to state specifically if New Year's Day holiday falls on a Saturday, the holiday will occur on the following Monday. If we want to be that specific about it, as opposed to the language that's been written by the HR team, run through AFSCME, because we'd have to just go back to AFSCME and have another meet and confer and make sure that they're okay with it. We'd bring it back to this committee as kind of the same situation. All right, we've met and conferred, AFSCME's okay with the specific language, everybody concurs, and then we can certainly come back, but it's staff's opinion, to be honest with you, that this is this seems to be clear, everybody seems to understand it, and it seems to make sense as opposed to being very specific.
Director Trans.
So we have all parties kind of buying into the original version.
Yeah.
And it gets a little more time consuming. And I guess you answered my question, is that you can work with the original version. So, I'm ready for public comment and a motion.
Make a motion.
I move that we accept
There's a
the
second.
original version.
So just to be clear, the recommended form of motion would be adopt resolution 2021-03.
There we go. Took me 2 years to learn how to do that.
Just go ahead.
I'll help you.
So I'm helping you. I don't have my glasses on.
To read the resolution number into your motion.
Yeah.
I'll second.
Still second? Okay.
I didn't realize, here's my question, it wasn't fully presented at APC, that this minor change to specify would make a difference.
Well, I felt it was, and I concur with Karen, so, anyway, we'll move on. Let's see, do we do public comment at this time? Did you want to comment, Director?
No, I have no comment.
Is there any public comment on this item? Public comment, star 9. Last chance. Seeing none, Madam Secretary, call the roll, please.
Division 5,
Yes.
Division 4?
Aye.
Division 3? Aye. Division 1?
Aye.
Division 2?
Aye. Thank you very much, Jenna.
Thank you.
Thank you, Janet.
Okay. Next item is number 2, our agenda. Just for a little update, before we have a staff report, this, for the benefit of our 2 new board members, this has been evolving, this item, for how long, Ricky?
No, I don't know.
Maybe a year or two since we've been on the board, talked, bantered about, and it's a good example. I've proposed to have this little speech about the legislative process. I'll save that for my comments later. But it's a good example of how legislation, if you will, works in NID, and I think it's run its course and brought it to the board today. So it's on the agenda for discussion, and because it's on the agenda, we can adopt one of the proposals or not. And with that, I'll turn it over to Greg, I believe.
Thank you, Director Bierwagen, members of the board and public who are listening. So you're right, this has been a conversation either officially at the board meeting. I think officially we really kind of brought it forth on December 9th.
Yes.
But probably unofficially and as a thought process. So today, you're right, there could be a full adoption of one of these options. Perhaps it's worthy of more conversation. I'm not sure, depending on what the conversation happens today. So I'm going to lay out for you 5 options that staff has thought about over the period of time. After last meeting, it was discussed to bring a little more detail back to the board on staff recommendations on what to do with committees. I'll give you a quick background and overview, and then we'll get into some discussion. Certainly, these options are just kind of spitball options, right? There's thought that's gone into them, but they can be amended, adjusted. There's many variations of each of these. So just want you to know that there's nothing set in stone in this staff report. So on December 9th, we talked about possible restructuring or elimination of certain committees within the district. Currently, the district has been operating under District Policy 5300, which defines our standing committees as 4 standing committees: the Administrative Practices Committee, the Water and Hydroelectric Committee, or the WHO, the Engineering Committee, and the Maintenance and Resources Committee, or the M&R. They're listed here in the staff report as per policy, generally when those dates are on a monthly basis. First Tuesday, second Tuesday, third and fourth Tuesday. Those have been adjusted over the years based on committee members' kind of personal needs, and so we've adjusted some of those. But in general, this is what they are. They set really 6 different public meetings a month for the district to engage on district activities, 2 official board meetings, and then 4 standing committee meetings. Of course, we have other ad hoc committee meetings that come up when there are different efforts to be discussed for the district purposes. They're not listed in terms of a standing committee, so we're not talking about those. And I reference, for one, the water rates committee. That only comes up every occasionally when we discuss water rates. The labor committee, that comes up when we're dealing with labor-related activities. So those are, put those aside, those aren't part of this discussion. We're really talking about these 4 standing committees. As discussed in District Policy 5300, the role of the committee, of each of these 4 committees, is to undertake district work in an open and transparent format and streamline the board's decision-making processes. Over time, the committees have expanded transparency with the community and have allowed the public to observe and provide input directly into the district's operations as an additional working space for district activities. Historically, these committees, we believe, have enhanced NID efficiencies. They've brought, at these committees, there is various initiatives that are brought to these committees ensure that the quality, consistency, and continuity of the district are put in place in order to ease the decision-making process of the board when certain items are brought to the full board. In the past few years, both board members and staff have expressed various concerns about the effectiveness of such standing committees and the time it takes to discuss these activities. As of late, certain items that have been brought forth to the committees have an increased probability of being pulled from consent agenda after a committee has made a recommendation to advance an item or an activity of the district to the full board for consideration that might be placed on the consent agenda. As items are being pulled from a consent agenda that have been discussed at a committee and been generally accepted by the committee members, that provides, as we pull those items from a consent agenda, it invariably adds additional discussion, further education, and understanding of a particular item to all board members. This added discussion inevitably expands the duration of our board meetings. It generally nullifies the purpose of the standing committee over time, and it's ultimately inconsistent with the purpose of the committee, bringing items to the full board for consent. So this has raised the question of whether or not these committees are actually working effectively and as intended. So as we began to identify these options, we did an analysis of the district policies and rules and regulations that are referenced in our actions and reference different committees over time. We found 14 different policies and rules and regulations that are somehow related to a reference to a committee, whether it's a committee of APC, a committee of M&R, or WHO, but there are various steps in all sorts of activities and processes of the district that will reference a rule and reg or a district policy, and those rules and regs and district policies are listed here. We've also attached them to the board agenda. We have, for some of these different options, gone through and actually redlined various policies and rules and regs, but because we're not presupposing a option at the moment, staff is not, we're saving that until a future date to bring forth, but we've done some homework there. So the five options are listed. Five options are listed here, but of course, as I said, some of these can be varied in many different ways. They're not set in stone, they're for discussion purposes only today. If we get to a point where there is a motion for an option, that's moving the ball forward, and we'll see where we get to at the end of the meeting. So very, very briefly, the five options. Number one that we've outlined is leave as is. Don't touch it. Let the committee stand. What we found in a staff time analysis of committee meetings only, this was not referenced to board meetings. In 2019, staff spent roughly $88,000 of staff time on committee meetings in 2019, and roughly $81,000 in 2020 of staff time. That's not cash outlay of expenses. That's just staff time devoted to those 4 committee meetings over the course of the year. This option is consistent with current existing transparency considerations, meaning this 6 meetings per month. There's nothing in board policy or actions that state we need 6 board and or public meetings a month. It just kind of is our consistent transparency related activity around that. So number one is leaving it as is. Number two is option number two is a variation of number one, and that's taking each of the committees and placing them in quarters. So you can see here where it'd be the first Tuesday, not of every month of APC, but it would be the first Tuesday of January, May, and September. Next one would be Tuesday of February, June, and October, and so forth. The variation here is that this gives the lead department staff, instead of having to turn around and create a new agenda item for the following month's committee meeting, while at the same time they're creating staff updates or reports for every board meeting that happens every 2 weeks, it gives department staff and managers a break, if you will, on bringing forth items for every single month of the year to a particular committee, and it spreads that burden out over the year, thereby, effectively reducing staff time to committee meetings, of which the actual time and duration is unknown at the point, but I consider that there would be some reduced staff time by taking each committee to a quarterly session as opposed to a monthly endeavor. It's noted that this would also reduce the publicly noticed public meetings for NID from 6 down to 3 per month. So there would be a half of our opportunity for the public engaged in district activities. It would still be there. Option number 3 is to consolidate all meetings, all committee meetings, into the board meetings. So the 2 board meetings a month, keeping those consistent, but consolidating the informational only correspondence. Some of these committee meetings, a great portion of the time is spent on just informing the committee members of activities of the district and activities of whether it's the hydroelectric department or the maintenance department or the engineering, and giving the committee members an update to what's going on. So in those instances, we're not asking for action, we're not asking for, follow through. We wouldn't bring that information to the full board. Eventually, it would just be an update to the committee. Those informational items actually there is a space within our board agenda under policy 5020 that is a space for informational correspondence. We don't typically post that to our agendas right now because that's brought forth every now and again when we have something that is really for informational purposes only. Every now and again we'll post something under that element, but we don't normally utilize that in today's normal board meeting. So we would probably enhance that section of the agenda packet, and there would be perhaps a once a month informational correspondence to the board for the different departments that would be giving those informational correspondence to a particular committee member and a committee over the course of each month if those committees stood. This would then also bring forth any items that are at the committee level currently that seek recommendation to go to the full board for either a consent, a full board consideration, or a general order. Those items would not be in a committee, and they would be placed on general orders of the district at period. And so they would come to the full board for consideration and education and discussion, as opposed to once at the committee level and then brought back to the full board a second time, increasing staff time and all those other things. So financially, this certainly would reduce staff time on the 4 committees per month, because those would be removed. But it would reduce the number of public meetings per month for the district from 6 to 2. Item number 4, consolidating the WHO, engineering, and M&R committee meetings into the board. This is similar to the option above, but it keeps APC as its own standalone committee, which could meet monthly or every other month or quarterly. There's some variations that can happen there, but the APC is special in that it is the only committee that can really approve financial discretion of the district. So it can approve up to $250,000 worth of cost expense. The other committees cannot. It can also discuss and approve policy direction and some other things. And so there's a benefit, staff sees some benefit to a committee of APC being held. However, if it only happens once a month or once a quarter, if there's something that a department needs to have answered, if a purchase needs to happen that's above their purchase authority and it's under the APC, they're probably better off going to the board fully anyway, according to general orders, if that happens every 2 weeks. So that one is sort of six-pack one, half a dozen the other, if we keep APC and we consolidate the others. But again, it brings the publicly noticed meetings and our discussion with the community to 3 meetings per month if we kept APC on a monthly basis. Finally, the 5th item is an option that Director Peters had brought forth back in December. I wanted to make sure it's captured, which was this consolidation, and I believe if this was captured correctly, I could be totally wrong, that the WHO engineering and M&R in general would come to sort of a once-a-month meeting to discuss various district activities kind of in one setting. If this happened on a monthly basis, we don't believe that this would necessarily eliminate much of a staff cost, because the same amount of time and effort would be going into a once-a-month committee meeting altogether with these different district business lines in discussing various things of projects and direction and priorities and stuff like that. And so anyway, this would bring our publicly notice down from 6 to 4, and this is assuming that we kept APC in the mix as well. So that's sort of the general overview of the kind of options that staff that we've outlined. Staff, I've spoken with this amongst our management staff, and generally there is the feeling that the committees don't operate in the manner in which they kind of were intended to operate. There's a lot of redundancy. There's a lot of communications that happen in a committee and that will happen at a board level anyway in another few weeks or a month or whatever. And so there is a interest among staff to work towards the elimination of these committees, some way, shape, or form. That's why I've selected, either option 2 or 3. But at this point, I think I've given you enough information to begin the discussion or continue the discussion. Mr. President, I as you said at the outset, we have the option, I believe, to work towards a decision here today. You also have the option to give direction back to staff and come back again for another, more detailed overview if you wanted to look at cost, if you wanted to look at, any interest of, any of these other options or any variation thereof, or if I'm inconsistent with some of these, please feel free to let me know.
Thank you, Greg. You've put more thought, and the staff has put more thought into this than I have. I think I had overload the past couple of days trying to consolidate in my own mind which seems the best direction to go, and I have not arrived there. But I do have a question before I ask for other questions. Is there any consideration for the staff time to change all these policies? I mean, there's bound to be
so it would be
cost there.
Sure.
That's another consideration if we go that route.
So the policy changes, like I said at the onset, we've already gone through and made red lines for a couple of these options. The actual cost to actually go through and make the red lines on changes is not much, but we would certainly have to come back to the full board, and we'd have to go policy by policy by policy by rule and reg, make the changes, make the recommendation, make the rationale as to why, so we have to connect to the direction that we want to go. There's effort there.
There would be effort there. That's what I concluded looking at this. Go, okay, we have to, knowing how policies developed and changed, and the effort is
But I would just caveat that in saying that it would happen once, and it would be done,
It'd be done.
right?
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for.
These policies, in case we shift back 5 years from now.
There's always a save as, there's a reason there's a save as button
That's right.
in Microsoft Word.
Sorry, Chris.
No, that's all right. No, it's good stuff, and I'm looking forward to this discussion, because as I said, the legislation process is working well on this case. I would note that, Ricky and I visited with the, general manager at PCWA, and learned that they do not have these standing committees. They only have a finance and budget committee, as we would call APC. So there's, some experience there. Other than that, I would entertain discussions this time. Do you want to start, Director Heck, since she was leading the charge on this one? And I agreed. I've been agreeing all along. I think we have some different, reasons for agreeing to do this, but, that's normal, so. You want to fill in some background for the benefit of our new board members.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, I've been thinking about this for months and months and months. And, I've come to this place of, I feel like we do need a change. This is inefficient. What the total overall answer is, I'm not sure, but I really, Greg, appreciate staff doing this harder thinking for us, because I didn't have the answer either. What I know from my own experience is that things happen at committee level that don't always float up to the board level. And, you know, one of the best examples from last fall was when we were talking about the shoulder season of water and extension or not, and why we can't or can, and all those kinds of things. And I ended up getting flooded with calls, and I think other directors did too, and I had no idea what anybody was talking about. And and then yesterday, I was watching the Who, and there was some really great discussion that took place. I think it was yesterday.
Yep.
Yesterday, Who? I believe.
One of the 6 meetings.
Yeah, and I thought, again, well, now here's the reason why this would be a useful discussion for the full board, rather than have them do it for the Who and then bring it back to the full board. And there was information there that, had I not been tuned in, I would not have had. So, you know, for me, it is being better informed as a board member, and things happen. For instance, another thing that happened, the Loma Rica DFW-LE, you know, that was in my division, or at least I thought it was at the same time. Chris and I had some confusion. But that whole thing kind of happened, and I had no idea, but I had been in contact with these people, and, you know, you begin to feel like you're out of the loop or something if you're not, you know, if it's not all there. So, and I think as public officials, we need to be in the loop on all of these things, because problems occur. We're here to represent not only our constituents, but the whole district. So if something is affecting the whole district, we all need to know about it. So, with that, but then, in addition to that, I thought, well, gosh, I really see a need for the APC, because also one of our most important responsibilities is our fiduciary to our ratepayers and our customers, and also to oversee the expenditures of the district. So in reading through this, where I arrived was a kind of a hybrid of number 3, rolling it all into one meeting, but then having, it's much like you said, PCWA, having an APC or whatever we want to call it, a financial and budget committee or something, to allow for greater movement, in the district. Somebody needs something more quickly and they don't want to wait for a board meeting. So what occurs to me is that would make sense would be to roll it all into the board meeting, but keep the APC, whatever we want to call it. And then lastly, I thought, and maybe we can look at this as kind of a pilot and start it at, pick a start date, whatever, March 1st, April 1st or something. And then reevaluate this again at the end of the year to say, okay, this is what worked, what didn't, do we need to change it? So that it's understood by the members of the public as well as board members that whatever we do can be changed back or changed or modified again. So that's kind of where I felt on it. Rich, your answer?
So, yeah, Director Heck, I'm going to support that. Whether APC stands alone every 2 months, every month, every 3 months, that's to be worked out as need dictates. And then the other committees are wrapped into one board meeting every 3 months.
They would be.
Or bi-monthly.
I would think we would have our regular board meetings, pardon me for interrupting you, and then as needed, if there are issues that need to come forward from those prior committees, they would bring them to the full board.
Understood.
So it wouldn't be necessarily, you can only bring this every 3 months.
I think as needed will always come to us. My concern is the transparency as the input from the public, because the committees have been a great vehicle for input, more relaxed conversation, and I don't want to lose that.
And I guess how I feel about the transparency is we'd be losing, in this case, 3 meetings a month instead of 4. And the public is welcome to be there for all of it. But what I anticipate is to have our agenda structured in such a way so that whatever it is, let's say some portion of the morning is going to be taking the place of what would have been committee work, and then the afternoon be something else, so that the public then can choose where they want to inject themselves and not sit there for 8 hours. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. You did it again. I know. Sorry.
I was looking at Ricky.
What's the president? Always the president.
Are
you raising your hand?
I was. I was just.
Trump thinks so.
I know.
And I obviously want, we need more community discussion.
Yes.
But I just want to clarify one thing. The thought process would be, for instance, let's take yesterday's food committee meeting. Those of you who might have listened to it or heard about it, there were 2 or 3 items that were clearly just informational updates, and it was what we call KPIs, key performance indicators of a particular department, right? Talks about, I don't know, if you're at maintenance, number of emergency outages, number of service line connections, number of meter replacements, and so specific updates that give the board some interest and keeping task of what the district's doing in the field. If there was something very unique or specific, then that would be included in this information. Like, there was a very major break or something that happened here and there. Those would be more informational items that would be included in our thinking would have been the first meeting of the month. That would be reflective of the last month's activities in the department specifically. So there would be maintenance sort of KPIs, hydroelectric KPIs, operations KPIs. Right. And if there was something very major that happened that we want to inform the board about, there was a wind event, there was something, that would be included in the informational. And maybe that would happen at the very first meeting of the board for the month, which is reflective of last month. So it would happen in February 10th, or activities that happened in January. So that kind of gives, that leapfrogs then another board meeting where that information then is collected at the beginning of the following month for the month at hand. But any time that there's, at any point that if a committee item that needed to be discussed and then brought forth to the full board anyway, or have some some consideration or a direction, that would come as needed to the board under general items as we
Right.
have it in today's
Right.
meeting agenda.
Right. That
So,
makes sense.
does that make sense?
Director Johansson.
What struck me at the WHO committee was that we had, two department managers there presenting the information, and I know their time is tight. And we need to be more efficient on how we receive that information. We don't need to have them, I mean, unless they
Do it
want
twice.
to,
Do it twice.
do it twice or even do it once. Just get us the information. It's fascinating to see the work they did at Bowman. Great job, incredible work on that department. But, we need to find how to give them more time so they're able to be more efficient in their job. They need more time. Just don't stress them by having them report to us all the time.
I think that's,
That's part of what's,
that's part of what's
what's going to play here.
What's driving it?
Okay, Director Peters and Hall hasn't had a chance to talk yet. Would you like to? Go ahead, Director Hall.
Well, in looking at the staff memo, thank you, Greg, for putting that together and for talking to your management team about their preferences. I noted that paragraph about the committees not working as originally intended, and had to raise my hand as being a person who would probably be contributing to that status because I'm a new board member.
Right.
And I'm very curious, I think we're all relatively new, even though we have some tenured folks. There is, I think we all share a common desire to be well informed in representation of our stakeholders and in supporting the district as a whole. So I kind of said, oh, well, I'll be guilty of that for sure. So, I think the other shortcoming of the subcommittees is that as a non-subcommittee member participant, let's say I zoom in on it, I can't speak, I can't ask any questions. So I learn information, but I can't, hello, what about this, what about that? So it does leave us half done. And it forces that conversation going to the full board. So I think that's part of the dynamic that makes them more difficult to manage. I would also offer that El Dorado Irrigation District as another comparable water district, they only have, everything comes to the full board. So that's another alternative. Or that supports the one model that's presented. I think there is a real important criteria, which is the immediacy of staff needing answers to questions. And so relative to APC. I still think that APC issues are ones that could be iterative. And so I'm wondering.
What was that word? I'm sorry.
Iterative.
Iterative.
You know, so we're iterative right now. We go to a subcommittee, then we go to the full board.
Would that be another synonym for iterative?
It's not actually a synonym, but
Okay,
it's,
for those of us who aren't,
Right.
aren't you?
You guys want to speak English?
all right, we'll use the word duplicative.
Okay, that's a little more understandable to me than everybody else.
Okay, I'll bring my thesaurus next time.
No, it's fun, it's good stuff, it's just,
No, sure,
lost me
absolutely.
there for a second.
Yeah, clarity is important. I still wonder if we don't end up in the same situation of having to bring things to the full board. So I think that Greg and the finance team are in the best position to really know what kinds of issues need to be separated out for quicker decision-making, and that are kind of no-brainers, you know. They either get approved or they don't get approved, and there's not a lot of controversy.
Yeah, like, we need a new truck because this broke down,
Yeah.
but it's over the expense amount,
Oh,
and
by
we
the
get
way,
it right now.
It's in the budget, by the way.
Yeah, and it's in the budget.
It doesn't
Yeah.
get approved again.
Yeah. The other thing I would encourage is things that are pure informational. We get them in advance, we read them. If we have questions, we pose the questions. We don't take staff time to make presentations about things that we can read, but rather put it on us to read and ask questions so that it hopefully streamlines staff time and our board conversation. I do think that, community engagement is really important, and their time is valuable too. And I think that community engagement we can encourage community engagement to be as strong with 2 well-structured board meetings per month, and where information is transparent and delivered as far in advance as we can. I mean, I think that's another challenge for staff is your backs are constantly against the wall with one more major new meeting to prepare for. It's huge. And so maybe that gives us more time on the front end for packages to go out, maybe not. But anyway, so I probably lean toward having one single meeting, but would defer to management on whether APC is a vital tool to efficiency in your business operation.
Thank you, Director Hall. Director Peters.
Okay, and thank you. I do appreciate all the staff's work to pull these options together. And my main goal for even bringing it up in December was just, we needed to consolidate, to try and get more information across the board so everyone's hearing the same information and the staff doesn't have to prepare meetings and go to meeting after meeting for the same topic. And so this is very good. I'm really encouraged and happy about the whole idea. And I do agree with Director Hall. I think that all of us board members bring different strengths to the conversation. And so if we were to go to the one everything heard in the board meeting, we could have informational items or items that are brought to a committee for discussion. Could be a discussion item in the morning, as Director Heck mentioned. We could have a morning discussion time for items that maybe wouldn't come to decision in the afternoon, but that would be gathering information and figuring out, and if it was okay, we could have it, we could then adopt it that day, or we could just say the next meeting staff could go back and take everybody's questions all at one time instead of taking some questions in engineering and then going to APC, getting other questions, and then going to the board and getting other questions, and then having to come back. That's the dynamic I'm trying to get away from. And so I think that I'm thrilled with the idea of everybody hearing the same information because, like, yesterday's meeting, there's just so much good information, and if you don't attend the meeting, and on APC, if Karen with her HR experience would have chimed in, it would have resolved it then, but then we had to bring it to another meeting because neither Chris or, HR is not my strong suit. And so I think to be able to put all of our minds together on each item makes a lot of sense, and I think it's going to ultimately streamline things. And we would have opportunities in the morning. It would be 2 days a month. It would be long meetings, but I think that the meetings would become much more productive and shorter in the long run because everyone hears the same information at the same time and can put their input, and if there needs to go back and have additional staff work, they've got it all at once, and they can come back, and then the next meeting we can resolve it. So I'm very in favor of it, and again, with this APC, I'm not sure. I'm on the fence. I don't have a feeling one way or the other because I haven't had experience with it to date, but I really like the idea of having informational items in the morning where we encourage public input, stakeholder input. They know that those 2 days a month, they don't have to go to 6 meetings a month to understand what the district is doing.
Right.
And if a board member sometimes will go, I got something to say about that, but I can't because it's on a committee that I'm not allowed to speak on. And so it's much more efficient, I believe, of everybody's time, especially staff time. As Director Joe Hansen mentioned, that these poor managers, they're going from meeting to meeting to meeting and preparing PowerPoints, and the staff, and as I mentioned yesterday, it trickles down all the way down to prepare these elaborate things to tell us. And so, again, if they send us information in advance, we can read it. If we have questions about what's going on, we'll ask those questions. But it saves everybody time. So I'm 100% in favor, and I would lean towards doing all of our business in 2 meetings a month.
So, would that be bi-monthly, quarterly?
Monthly. It's like 2 months, two meetings.
Bi-monthly.
2 meetings a
Without,
month.
no committee meetings, right?
but all the
Correct.
committees would be every 2 months.
No committees.
Suggesting no committees at all.
I'm suggesting
No, I
no
understand
committees.
that, but I mean,
And that the
would
information
all the managers would be here every 2 months to present their department?
2 times a
You mean
month.
2 times a month?
Or we
If
would
it
have,
was necessary.
If it was necessary.
right, yeah.
Yeah.
What I might suggest is that, so you're changing it sounds like, and maybe I'm incorrect, you're changing the flow of the board meetings. Right now we have consent, and then we have general orders. And then currently in our policy 5020, the informational correspondence is packaged at the very end. It's even after director's items reports. And so what I was referring to is that's where those kind of department level KPIs live in the informational correspondence. Maybe if there's something that unique happened the month before, that's where the department managers have inserted information for the department so that you get a sense of what's happening on KPIs. You get a sense of if there's something of outside the general norm of activity that the board needs to be awarded to or informed of, then it happens in this informational correspondence. And we're not really, the department managers who put that informational correspondence in there, KPIs, et cetera, or unique circumstances, they might be available. They would be available to ask if information came out of there and you said, oh, I want to know about this. And but it would be at the very last part of the meeting, and it would almost happen, I would think, at the first meeting of the month. So that section is really amplified the first meeting of the month, so February 10th versus February 27th meeting, because it talks about last month's activity. And then we do it again in March, on the March meeting, in the early part of March. And then all items of district consideration for the board happen in the morning, right? We get the business of the district out of the way in the morning. Inevitably, we're going to have potentially four committee meetings worth of district consideration. So, for instance, yesterday we had 2 items from the WHO that were not only informational, but they need furtherance of the board. They need further board discussion or consideration if it's consent. And so those 2 would be on the general orders, right? Right. So we take the time it took to discuss those and general staff reports. The department manager is here, and we talk about those items. That's going to be on each board meeting, 2 different board meetings a month. And so depending on the flow of information and the need from the department manager on when they need that information back in order to act on it, we could either, schedule that out as I work with the board secretary and the president. We can schedule some of those things out. But it could be that we have some pretty heavy information and detailed board meetings for a period of time, right? So we could be in the period of a protracted board meeting. Not that that's not abnormal right now. We go typically into 2 o'clock or so.
Well, yeah, but if you take the committee meetings and add them to the board meetings, you get the same amount of time.
You're right, exactly. We're adding those anyway.
Right.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, you may ask a question.
So, would you anticipate a time when we would be receiving information from whomever? Like yesterday, the surplus water declaration, that was a very interesting discussion, but not everybody got to hear it because they weren't all here. And then, so we could hear the information in the morning and then might have to act on it in the afternoon. I could see where that might be.
She's shaking her head.
I see her shaking her head, but
I'm looking at Dustin, really.
You have to be agendized, right?
Could you say potentially acted on, or,
well, or you would just make a placeholder. It's like, we're going to hear about the surplus water declaration, hear the information, and then you make a placeholder in the afternoon for general orders so that we could have the information fresh in our minds, for one, rather than waiting another 2 weeks or whatever. So, that was just what occurred to me when you were talking about it.
I think that would be sort of listed in the items. There would be general orders for, information could come up in general orders anyway. We don't need, in general orders, you don't always need some direction, right, or a decision to be made. So we could have item number 1, an overview of surplus water. And there's a discussion and there's And then item number 10 is the decision,
Yeah, yeah.
but that,
Or not. I mean, but I was just like, you were saying to have the action items in the morning and then have the informational in the afternoon, which is fine. But then it made me question, is there ever a situation where the information that we would receive would need to then be acted on afterwards?
I think it depends on timing and the department manager's need for some action or consideration and direction, right? I think if there's a unique circumstance that, department manager may say, look, I need to talk about this to the board today, or in a week from now, or 2 weeks, but I really don't need the decision for another month, but I want to get you teed up.
That's fine too, that's up
and
to the manager.
discuss, right. And so, and then everybody hears it, everybody discusses it. There may be times, Director Heck, that there's, a need for something comes up and we need to make the decision now. And I could see, for instance, yesterday in the option or the WHO discussion regarding the training for hydroelectric.
Yeah.
Those are like, PG&E gives us a call, says, I got a slot open and you got to let me know in a week. We don't have the luxury of waiting 4 weeks of time to bring information to the board. It would be, here's information, I want you to consider it, and then make a decision at the end. But I think that's an option that could be left on the table, and as needed, we can determine how that flows if we look at this as a pilot idea.
I like,
Go ahead, Director Holt.
sorry.
That's all right.
I appreciate the nuance of that, and I think the more we can encourage rapid decision-making where it makes sense, where we need time to think about things is fine, but where we can encourage the efficiency for the staff and in the decision-making, that we support that.
Right.
And structure our meetings such that. And I don't think that, I think what you described, Greg, was consistent with what Laura is intending, that there's subject matter information that the board needs to hear and learn about, culminating likely in a decision at some point. It's just that information is heard by all.
Go ahead, Director Peters.
Absolutely. I completely concur, and like oftentimes in the committee meetings, we hear an item and we get input to bring to the board at a later date, right? And so, in a way, we would hear those items. I prefer in the morning, and if there's a quick decision, then we could have a placeholder. But many times it's, what do you think about that? And it's that back and forth discussion with the stakeholders and public to say, okay, well, this is what we're thinking. So we could discuss that in the morning, and then we could get all the input, and then it could be brought back in the morning at the very next meeting, 2 weeks later, and then we could act on it in that afternoon. And it would actually shorten the time frame of a lot of these items, because everybody's heard the same, you've got everybody's input. You don't hear it engineering and at ATC, and they get to board, and someone that wasn't on engineering or ABC goes, well, wait a minute, have you thought about that? And so it would actually, I believe, speed up things. And if we needed to act on something immediately, we could. I'm pleased to know that we could have a placeholder to where if there was their no-brainer in the morning, and we heard it and said, oh yeah, that makes sense. We're good with it as is. Let's adopt it in the afternoon. And so I like it. To me, it keeps everybody more informed, and it gives, especially we need that public space so our stakeholders, people can be participating in the discussion, and we could have those discussions in the morning. And then just as you mentioned, the key performance indicators and those just merely update things, you could have those at the end. So I don't know how that fits with our current, because you were saying that the information has to be all in the afternoon. Could we split that information and have like workshops in the morning for developing ideas that would normally be developed in committee, have the board, decision-making portion of the meeting in the afternoon, and then have the update. And you had mentioned have all the updates in one meeting. You could stagger them. You could have 2 of the updates in the first meeting of the month and 2 of the updates in the next meeting of the month. Or
Who's writing all these ideas down?
Our board secretary.
Oh, okay. So I just want to tell you one point here. as we've talked about, one of the things I appreciate about the committees is the ability for the public to come in and we have a chat with them. And normally on agendized items, we don't chat with them. We don't allow that conversation. We don't respond to public comment. And so that's one area that, how we fold this in, I don't have an idea right now, but keeping that, and it's back to the morning portion of allowing the public to know that at 9 o'clock they can start talking. That's when we're gonna start talking. They don't have to wait all day long until we get to the agenda item. Those two ideas, if we can, are on my mind too, because like I said, I really like the committee meeting structure. Not, I don't want to say relaxed, but less formal. But how we could blend that in, and I like the idea of the morning, afternoon.
Yeah, I like the morning session.
Of being able to do that, so that they know that time certain they don't have to sit there all day and wait. Although, you know,
They can choose to.
we're going to get this more complicated than it maybe needs to be, but that's what we'll flesh out. Director Johansson.
Well, no, I'm going to support that. That was my idea, keep the workshop mentality, atmosphere.
In the morning, right?
Well, during the
somewhere
presentation to the committee.
Somewhere during the meeting that we can have that, and then
So, can I ask
yes.
a question of legal counsel? The discussion purpose of an item that's on the agenda, that can be a free-flow discussion with the public, or does the public typically give a 3-minute comment period on an item, and then they're cut off in a formal board meeting versus a committee?
Normally, you, on a business item, agendized business item, you would have formal rules about duration of public comment. You only get one bite at the apple, right? They can't, repeat themselves. So you get away from that by having a workshop type setting where you're limited, no action's going to be taken. This is purely dialogue. Therefore, the limitations on duration of speaking and only one time speaking and so on go away.
But the board could choose, just so I'm clear, that's legislative or statute, or the board could choose to say, okay, we get 5 minutes for discussion, or 2 minutes, or whatever, in that morning time.
Yeah, you need to be careful about that.
In a workshop setting?
So the way I like to do it is structure it ahead of time.
Right.
What I heard you say is kind of on the fly.
No, I was saying, the board could structure it ahead of time and say, okay, the morning session, is meant for informational and for receipt of public comment and ideas. However, those comments will be limited to X minutes per person. I mean, why not put a limit on it, like we do everything else?
I would put a limit on the total duration. So the workshop's going to happen from 9 to 10.
I see, okay.
Rather than, if you want that dialogue, there may be a person out there that has subject matter expertise
Right.
that ought to be given more time because they're just bringing so much to the table.
There you go.
You don't want to confine that person in that setting
Right.
to a 5 minute.
Good, that's right.
Right. Big comment?
Okay.
Can
Go ahead, Director
just
Geer.
so I understand, so I'm clear on what we're saying. So what I understand you saying, please correct me if I'm not right, but is that we could structure it that we have morning workshops on items that would normally be brought to committee. Some items come to committee, say, well, what do you think about this? This is what we're thinking, and let's talk about it in an informal setting. So any of the 4 departments on any meeting could bring items on that morning agenda to start developing ideas that would not be brought to the board until the business meeting. So we could have information workshop mornings and business meetings on the same day, perhaps.
Yes.
And then we would hear all the information that would be normally heard in a committee, and then say, okay, we're going to take it to the next, it's going to go on the business of the next meeting. Or something, or if it's still something, a long-standing idea where we're developing something over more than one meeting, we could say, okay, we're going to get this information, bring it back to the board, talk at the next meeting, flesh it out more, and then put it on the business agenda.
Yes, that's all acceptable. We would just need to very clearly delineate that in our agenda.
Would there be direction on those items? That would be looking for direction and have to be agendized as
I think it depends.
provide direction as appropriate.
I think it's, from what I'm hearing, is you're coalescing around this concept of in the morning, kind of what would be committee items brought to the board as sort of workshop discussion with the public at time certain for a particular period of time, depending on how many we have, and the board manages that time period between then and then.
Yep.
If what we think might be a no-brainer discussion,
Yes.
right?
Well, that's where I was.
Kind of a, well, you know, this we want input from the community.
Mhm.
It may take 3 minutes of discussion,
Right.
but at least all the board gets input, and then based on staff's sort of assessment of a no-brainer item, we put that on an agenda action item for a general order in the afternoon.
Yes.
As a placeholder, yeah.
As a placeholder.
Yes.
And it may or may not come to fruition. We may get to the afternoon agenda and say, pull that item, what we thought might have been a no-brainer requires more information and
More
discussion,
thought,
blah, blah,
yeah.
blah. So we pull that. Perhaps items that are on that workshop, if staff or if in preparing for it, we know that there's just gonna be more information and more need and another discussion, that may not get on the agenda for the afternoon for a direction if a direction ultimately is needed.
Right.
And the third way that happens, I think, is we've got something that was discussed could have been a month ago, could have been 3 months ago. Staff went back and got more information, and then it was time to bring forth onto a board agenda item, specifically like we do now, and it falls under the 3 minutes per item. You know, there's not much dialogue back and forth.
Formal business.
Yeah, the decision, staff's recommendation, the decision is this. And of course, it can always be punted back to a workshop if necessary, which has happened.
That could be the decision.
Right, and it's happened.
And parliamentary procedure allows for that with the tabling of motion, either time certain or not forever. So that, I'm not saying it very well. It hasn't been used much, but we could certainly, that would make it all legal and work that way by just saying, we don't not necessarily pull it from the agenda, but we're going to table it for further discussion to a time certain date or not.
Right. So there's so many variations that can happen here, right? There's times that we haven't had a committee meeting for a few months because there's really been nothing to update.
Right.
Correct.
Right? And so I want to make sure that we're still working on that assessment that staff is if there's really truly nothing to bring forth and have some workshop presented, I don't want to just start creating stuff out of the blue in order to have a workshop.
No kidding.
Right?
The point of this is.
Okay, all right, fair enough. Just want to make sure we're on the same page there.
Yeah.
Director Peters.
So thinking that, as the legal counsel mentioned, we'd have to have a time certain on the workshop portion of the meeting. And I was thinking, and that raised a question, if we finish our workshop portion in an hour, if we said, okay, we're gonna devote 9 till noon for workshop if needed, and then if we get done in an hour, then the business meeting could come at 10 o'clock instead of 1 o'clock, or, you know, that kind of thing.
I think you could do it a couple different ways. You can create a very structured, it will be this time, and we will not get to items of business until 1 o'clock, as an example. Or you could not do any certainty as to time, and just naturally come up to items of business when your informational component of the meeting ends. That's really a matter for the public.
Right. It is a matter.
And their viewpoint on that, would they be, there may be some folks in the public that are interested in item 22A.
Right.
Very specific item of business, and they would sure like to know that that's not gonna happen before 1 o'clock. So it really just depends on the public's input on that.
All right.
Well, I just want to weigh in one thing. So the Board of Supervisors does their agenda really similarly. They do sort of informational items from department heads in the morning. And then they have a time certain, they come back and they reconvene at 1 for their business items. And that way, the public then knows, it gives a little bit more structure to the meeting.
And that way, if we finished at 10 o'clock, then we would be on break until 1.
Take a break for a few
Yeah,
hours.
that's right.
time, we'll entertain public comment on this item about restructuring our committee and our board meetings. If you'd like to comment on this item, star 9. We haven't got anybody watching. I mean, not watching, not raising their hand.
You know, I also wonder about staff, you know, but you talk to staff,
I'm thinking
right?
about
That's
staff.
right, that's right, okay.
I'm thinking about how this works, and I think generally it works.
I think it does. I think it can be really efficient. It might be a little bumpy in the first
It'll
couple of
certainly
times.
be bumpy for a little bit, and we all.
Well, I like the idea of, and I'm not asking for a motion right this time, we're still waiting for some public input. If there's anybody in the public who would like to speak, last chance, before we move on to action or not. You'd like to star 9? Okay, seeing none, we'll, any more comment from the board at this time? I would like to say, for my part, I'm been a advocate of this also, mostly for the informational part. You know, and I really like Karen's idea for the information. A lot of it, we could read that and be good with that. A lot of it, and some of it, and this is all subjective to which, you know, we talked about getting into the weeds. For those of you that would really like to go into the weeds, you can read it at home, right? And but from a general interest standpoint, if we're not interested as board members, then we shouldn't be doing this. So we really do. Most of the action items do not require us knowing that to do the job. However, there's the general information and interest that I'm really curious about everything and want to, but I don't need to be in the weeds with engineering, because I know nothing about that, and I can trust the staff to do that for me. So that's an example. And we've covered all the other areas that I was concerned about at this time. I'm not certain that we're going to make this business any more efficient or not, and that would take time to see. As far as efficiencies go, I'm not convinced today about the efficiency, because there's a lot to this job. But I'm certainly open to a trial period, or even a more definitive one than that. It's great.
So I just want to be clear. We're talking. Well, I don't know yet. First of all, you mentioned APC, and I feel like the discussion is going towards no APC and just 2 board meetings and all committees consolidated into the board meetings with a morning session as a workshop, ability for interaction of the public. The items in that session would be those items that would have been originally brought to a standing committee for direction or information or discussion in the, we'll say afternoon, but it may be before then. The second part of the meeting. Second phase is general items, and those are just plain old general items that we're seeking recommendations for and consideration. And then there's still this informational piece, which is items that would be at the committee level for information only and not necessarily for discussion or, you know, these KPIs or these metrics that kind of report back to the board on certain metrics of the progress of department. And I see those as separate from a discussion point that would be in a workshop where there would be a back and forth. Am I incorrect on thinking that?
No, correct.
Well, I don't know, I see it differently. I see that those KPIs should be in the morning session with all the information.
That's what you said, right?
Right.
No, I said they would need to.
He said in the afternoon.
Okay,
I've been saying
all right, that's good.
And we can change that policy,
That's
right?
fine.
Okay, so others have,
Yeah.
no, I think,
Oh, she's ready. Okay. I was gonna, I lost my train of thought, so go ahead, Director Hall.
I think it makes sense to move them to the morning, perhaps as one of the first items on the agenda. Kind of my thought is, let's tied up in kind of limbo, half paying attention to a meeting where they don't have an interest to be on hold to give an informational item. So I try to shift things so they're at the front end, they're free then, or they stay to give informational, in the workshop.
Okay.
Thank you. Director Peters.
And, thank you. And so, for example, if we get these status updates and we're able to review them in advance, then I'm just trying to think through. Let's say we wanted to know more about the forest thinning project that's going on, or you want to know about a project that's on the engineering status list, what's going on with that project. This would be part of that informational time. Is that how we're thinking it?
Yes, if it's written in the document and it's in this informational kind of workshop list of things, then that staff member, that department manager or staff member would be ready to answer questions if a question came up.
Okay.
Right?
And it'd only be our specific questions. They don't have to go through line by line and tell us every one.
No,
Just say, we can read it. If we have a question about one, we'll ask that.
That's right. I think so.
I like that. I think that's
so.
good. We can read.
It lists, it's there, you can read through it, if you have a particular question, you can ask, that person will be available to answer, and then that item will move on,
They're done. Yeah.
and we go forward.
I do too.
So back to, Greg, you mentioned APC, and I didn't get a feel from the board. I originally, going through this, was in favor of retaining APC and eliminating or consolidating all the other committees. Did anybody else have a input on that particular thing? Or you have your hand up?
I haven't thought about that. Perhaps because the APC is the president and vice president,
Right.
We could have, I don't know, we could call it an ad hoc APC, so if something comes up and you need to coordinate just with the two of us and say, we need to have a meeting, next Tuesday, because something's come up that can't wait for another week, if anything's that critical, that it only, and the president and vice president, that's part of our responsibility as those positions, that we have to make ourselves more available on an as-needed basis.
So, hearing the board speak about this, I think of this more as the flow of information. And rather than from kind of a bottom-up, from staff to committee and then maybe to board, it's starting with the board and then maybe to committee. So, it's just an idea, tagging on what Director Peters said, rather than abolishing all the committees, the flow of information comes to the board, and then the board, should it so choose, can kick an item to a committee.
Well, there's an idea.
And then, I can foresee a scenario where a committee could be really useful.
Yes, right.
And by the way, that's what most districts in my experience do. They have a committee structure, they populate the committees with their directors, but then they don't use them on a regular basis. They use them on an as-needed basis.
Okay.
So there's not a regimented schedule of every, first Tuesday, second Tuesday, and so on. But I can see a scenario where there's an item that you just need to grind on, and you really need the public to grind on it as well. Maybe rates is a good example.
Yes, absolutely.
And for the full board, the full board could do that, but it's really a grind for the full board.
Right.
And it may be the type of thing that is better suited for a committee to really work, interface with the community, and then come back. There could always be check-ins with the board.
Right.
So again, I'm thinking of this as more of the flow of information. It's to the board first, then potentially back down to the committee before coming back to the board.
For additional work.
Right.
So remember, we're not talking about things like rates committee on this process. Rates still lives, stuff like that. Labor committee still is there. But I see your point. If there's something that comes forth and
That's spillway.
Yeah.
big issue that
Really need.
And we all need to know about that one, because it's going to be a
and everybody,
big
or it's gonna take, 9 months to get to a point.
Right.
But a couple board members are needed. Staff needs some board check-ins, board member check-ins. Maybe a committee is appropriate for something like that.
And leaving them all in place means we would need to amend any of the policies in the rules, right?
It's less amendments.
or less amendments.
Less amendments.
Less amendments. We leave the standing committees as they are, the definition still stays as the committees, not getting rid of, but we remove the time,
The
first
obligation.
Tuesday of every month.
There we go.
The obligation
It's
for
just
them to
as
meet.
needed.
And there is needed.
There isn't.
Yeah, they become ad hoc, just like labor and rate.
That was my question, is what APC does.
Yeah, the name of them changes from the standing to
They
ad hoc.
They would all be ad hoc.
So,
And then
let me
theoretically,
just clarify, an ad hoc committee is a committee that's not subject to the Brown Act. It's for a discrete,
Oh, okay.
limited purpose item.
Okay,
So, in my opinion, you still have standing committees,
okay,
you just wouldn't have regular meetings of the standing committee.
there we go.
They would be special meetings. So they'd still be open to the public, Brown Act notice, everything along those lines, but you just wouldn't have that regimented schedule of meeting on such and such a date.
Just
Ready
like
for a
this
motion?
discussion
That
right now,
makes sense.
like this discussion right now, I'm leaning towards send it to APC for some more noodling, right?
Yeah.
Grim's favorite word.
Uh-huh.
So noodle it. I don't know how you all feel about needing to noodle more or less on the idea, but I sort of feel like it's not appropriate to make a firm vote today, but that's up to you guys.
Oh, I'm ready to make a
I-
firm vote.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Did you want
Who
to
wants to phrase the motion?
what's that?
Who wants to,
You want to make the motion?
Well, okay, let me give it a stab at
Okay.
it, with the understanding
I'll
that
stab with you.
amendments and additions are welcome. Okay, so, the board would approve of changing the committee structure,
give direction to staff.
give direction to staff, thank you, see, already. Give direction to staff to change the committee structure, to consolidate all standing committees into a bi-monthly board agenda, thereby eliminating the standing committee's regular meetings, and in place of that, allow for those standing committees to be, used as needed and at the direction of the board,
Including APC?
including APC.
Good?
I second, and well said.
Okay?
Very well, yes.
Well,
I would add maybe one thing, and bring a revised board agenda to the board for finalizing
for final adoption,
this pilot process.
correct,
So to add on to that, we need to make trailing edits to all our policies
yes.
as needed. And what I'm envisioning is we almost need a new template, board agenda to make sure we've all
I
understood each other. So staff will do that pursuant to your motion if this passes.
Are you,
And bring this back as well as a new template agenda.
And bring back a new board template agenda with the rest direction of informational workshop type component in the morning and business action items in the afternoon.
Or afterwards.
second period?
Or, you know,
Right, right.
whatever. I still think it's nice to have a time certain break.
But we might have 1 hour of workshop.
That's
We
true,
know
that's
that.
true, but we'll rely on staff
But
to
time
direct that. Okay?
And all changes to policy that are needed.
And all changes
Yeah.
to our written policies as needed.
About 7 things here.
I know I've got it.
You counted them.
It's a very long motion, but I think I've got it.
No. I would recommend this comes back to the full board at this point. There's no reason there's an
No.
NPC necessary.
No,
Are you calling it a pilot project? Did you throw in that word, the pilot?
I
part?
didn't, and how about if then we further add to the motion, that this is to be a pilot project to begin, will it be
March 10th?
too soon to say March 1st,
March 10th?
March 10th,
Or
and to be reevaluated at the first meeting in December?
1 year.
1 year, okay, to be reevaluated in 1 year as to the effectiveness.
Or do we even need to add that clause?
We don't really need to add that because we'll know within 6 months.
And we can change this stuff without
Okay,
adding that
so
clause.
to begin at the first board meeting in March.
If it's not working, you can pull it.
We could.
Yep.
Right. Right?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, well, that would or to have it changed, to actually go into it at the next board meeting, we have to come with the changes.
Yeah.
Right, that's right. The changes, especially in the agenda, yeah.
Can we do that? Can the staff?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay,
All right.
great.
I'll second that lovely motion.
Thank you.
Can you repeat it, please?
No, I cannot.
Okay, is there any further board discussion on this item? Is it,
For my first, my second was Director Johansson?
pardon me?
And the third, is that what? Oh, I'm sorry, okay.
There was,
Okay,
yeah, you
we
had,
don't need
yeah,
more
2
than that.
seconds. Is there any public comment
If
on
there's,
this item? To change the format of our committees and our meetings?
And seeing none.
Any public comment? If you'd like to comment on this item, star 9, last chance to comment.
Everybody must think it's a good idea.
They must. Okay, well, we think it's a good idea.
We do.
Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Division 5,
yes.
Division 4,
Aye.
Division 3, aye. Division 1,
All right,
Division 2.
Aye. Thank you, everyone, for a
thank you, that was good
Most
discussion.
good.
Hey, give ourselves a hand, that was awesome.
On that note, would anybody like to take a 5-minute break?
Yes, sure.
Okay,
Thank
we will take a 5-minute break.
President?
Mr. Chip will have to wait a minute. Still chewing though.
We are on resigning. Here we go. All right. Ready?
Are we live?
We are live.
Okay, we'll reconvene the meeting. Next item on the agenda is number 4, NID Resolution 2020-8, Delinquent 2020 Irrigation Account. Good morning, Chip. How are you?
Good morning.
Good morning, Aurora. How are you?
Good morning.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. Yes, good morning, everybody. Chip Close, Water Operations Manager, along with Aurora Gibson, Customer Service Administrator. This morning, as you mentioned, we're here to discuss Resolution 2020-08, which is NID's COVID emergency resolution. And we're going to discuss how that pertains to Governor Newsom's executive order regarding COVID, and also how that relates to our 2020 delinquent irrigation water account. So a little background for you all. On April 2nd, 2020, Governor Newsom enacted Executive Order 4220 as part of the COVID response. The executive order suspended the authority of water system providers from discontinuing residential water service for non-payment. The order also extended to businesses in critical infrastructure sectors that are vital to protect the health and well-being of all Californians. The district, in an effort to abide by that EO, also put out our own Resolution 2020-08, which suspended customer turnoffs and all delinquent fees for the duration of the emergency. And that's all great and noble things, and I totally get it. Where we're running into a bit of a snag is that between the governor's executive order and the district's own resolution, it's very gray on what kind of services we're talking about. For instance, in the governor's executive order, and y'all have it in your staff packet, if you go down to the bottom where it is hereby ordered that, under number 1, it very clearly states that we cannot shut off residential service for non-payment. Okay, so that's clear. We're very clear on that. We're not shutting off any treated water residential account. Number 2, again, it references very clearly, we shall not discontinue residential service. So that's good. Moving on to number 4, this is where it gets a little tricky for us. Water systems shall not discontinue service to any business in the critical infrastructure sectors as designated by the state public health officer as critical to protect human health and well-being of all Californians that qualify as a small business. So we went in and dug under CFR 121.201 and found that there are a lot of small businesses on that list. And some of them include farming and ranching and livestock and all of that. What's not clear, though, is what kind of service are you disconnecting? Is it continuing treated water service to those, or is it ag water service? So we're left scratching our head a bit. And I'll add to that, and I apologize, I'm flipping back and forth, but if you go into the district's resolution on the back page, under the now, therefore, it is hereby resolved, item number D, it says we will suspend customer turnoffs for the duration of the emergency. Again, not specific. So we are at a time where we are now signing up customers for 2021 irrigation water. Generally speaking, in the past, absent the COVID emergency, we're at the time where we would be mailing those customers who are delinquent for last year's water supply that, hey, you need to pay up now, or you run the risk of not getting next year's water. Okay, so we're kind of at that cusp where we need to make that determination. So staff has interpreted this a number of ways, and we'd like some guidance and input. We got some of that from APC. But we wanted to come to the full board and get everybody's input as well. Essentially, the staff's input initially was, this only affects treated water accounts. We need to move forward with our raw water account and notify them that they're beyond due and you run the risk of not getting 2021 water. In addition, staff also feels like we're not shutting off any services because these services are renewed every year. It's not like we're shutting somebody off who's already getting service. We're just not turning them on for the next year. It's a little bit of a around the edges type discussion.
Mhm.
But it's true.
But it is true.
But that's kind of where we're at. And the whole bottom line for all of this is we currently have 286 delinquent irrigation season accounts, and we're in the rears of a loss of revenue of $190,000. So this is no small chunk of change.
At 286 out of how many?
It's gonna be roughly, nearly 5,000 seasonal customers.
Yeah, so I was trying to figure this out as a percentage.
Yeah. Is that typical? Is that within the
No,
realm of prior
that's my
years?
question. How typical is that?
I didn't compare it specifically to other years, but just anecdotally, I would say it's higher. We always have a certain amount of accounts that have unpaid balances, but I would still say overall, this is higher than normal.
So moving forward, I see there's a couple options for us. Number one is we can classify this as no, it only affects treated water. We may get some challenges on that. Number two is we can say that, no, these are new services and we're not shutting off any service that's being currently provided. There's that option. Number three, we can move forward and acknowledge that we're not shutting off any service, period, knowing full well that this will be going to the county tax rolls in a few months anyway. That brings up a whole nother can of worms, but it is an option available to us. And I wanted to highlight a couple of things. In the governor's executive order, page 2, just below number 5, it says, nothing in this order eliminates the obligation of water customers to pay for water service, prevents a water system from charging a customer for such service, or reduces the amount a customer already may owe to a water system. So to me, when I read that, it is implying to me that we are authorized to go and get payment for the services already rendered at some point in time. So I think that's still a viable option for us as well.
Chip, if I may, I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
I went through each of these accounts, and less than 5 of them have contacted the district to make an arrangement for payment, to ask to be put on some sort of payment plan. Many of them have just completely ignored the bill, or paid only a very small percentage of it. Generally speaking, we try to be very flexible with our customers and find a plan that works for them. So, to get to this point, it's fairly blatant.
How many of those customers are food producers? Do you have any way to know that?
I don't.
Or ranchers, you know?
I know that,
Production?
65% of them are one-liners and choosers or less. Some of those may be producing small farms, but, I didn't specifically look at all of their crop reports. Oftentimes they're, so, I attempted to, but sometimes they have 10 different crops listed for a tenth of an acre each, so.
And Aurora, how often have we reached out to these customers over the course of the year?
The customers receive 3 bills each year.
So,
So do they get late notices? I mean, have you sent out notices saying, hey, you still haven't paid?
Not since the end of the season. The intent would be to send them out a notice. Now we're getting ready to send out change in service letters, the annual change in service letters. With that notice would be, a reminder. Your account is past due and you need to contact us by this date in order to receive service, and make a payment arrangement.
Well, I have a question, because I've never fallen in this category, but what if I paid the first installment and never paid second and third? What is the procedure, time frame for recovering that, or do you keep delivering the water all season?
So, under normal circumstances, we would start turn-offs in June, had you not paid your first installment. Of course, this year, we did not do that.
And if I paid my first installment but didn't pay my second?
We would turn you off in August.
In August, okay. So there is a time frame. And I would have gotten a notice, but my bill was due in July.
Correct. So you would receive your initial billing in, middle of March.
Middle of March, right?
And then you receive a bill in June and a bill in August.
August, yeah, okay.
So, in those 3 options I pointed out, they are all viable options, but I will state that, going the lien the property route, costs the district a lot more money, there's a lot more process to it, and B, it's not always the water user who owns the property. And so you may be leaning the property, however, the person who owns the property was not the end user of the water. So that's an additional challenge to going down that road. So staff preference would be to handle this like we do any other year and say, hey, look, your 2020 account is still delinquent, please pay up, or
come in and make a payment arrangement.
Or make a payment arrangement, or run the risk of not getting water for 2021. Here's all the ways we can help you with making payment arrangements. I think that's the cleanest moving forward, realizing that some people may want to fight about, whether or not they're critical infrastructure.
Right. And what about fees and fines?
And late fees.
No, those have been canceled.
Those have been canceled per our own resolution, so they're not getting any additional fees added to the account. So it's still a pretty darn good deal.
Yeah.
And the fact that we're willing to do a payment arrangement, I think we're being as flexible as we can. But again, that's the way staff would recommend we move forward.
Okay, any more questions?
I have one other question in terms of the customer profile. So of the 190,000 in arrears, are there like 5 customers that are sort of big dogs that have, get a whole lot of water and then the rest are like small customers, or is this kind of spread pretty evenly among small customers? I'm just kind of curious if there's a couple big offenders and then a bunch of little offenders.
So 65% of the accounts are 1 minor inch users or less. 3% use greater than 10 inches,
Oh, okay, well, that's good to know.
and then in between.
Most of our larger ag customers, it is their business, and so they're doing the best they can to make sure their business is upstanding and keeps moving forward. So these tend to be the smaller users that seem to be delinquent at this point.
So Chip, how did, if I may, Mr. President?
Yes, sir, go ahead.
How did we have any scenarios last year that Director Beerwagen alluded to where they paid the first installment but maybe not the second or the third? How did we treat those last year? Did we not shut them off?
We did not. Okay. And yes, we had many of them.
So we did have that kind that did not shut them off.
Correct.
Because of our resolution.
Yes. Where in the past,
They would have got.
that was our stick.
Yes.
You pay once, you don't pay again,
You get
notice shut off, and then, I found the money. But moving forward, right now, all of those customers are on. Right?
They're all off.
So now we're talking about a new service for 2021.
Right.
Yeah. So,
But you honored the terms of the resolution?
correct. Yes. But the resolution is still in.
So for those customers that are in the 65% who have 1 minor inch or less, what does that translate to for dollars?
That is roughly $67,000.
No, I mean per customer.
Oh, per customer? A 1 minor inch customer was right around $750.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's less than 1,000 per each one. Okay, I'm just trying to get a sense of scale. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Laura?
And this is something that we discussed in APC, but, just so for the benefit of the other board members, if we don't go this lean route, we forego ever being, if they say we are not gonna pay, they just don't get any water.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. So, if we choose none of the above and just move on with life, and we don't go the lien route come April, we only have one crack at it, because you can only lien the property for the fees for 1 year prior. After that, you lose your opportunity to go back and get it. So, that's a concern for staff as well. That's why we're here talking about it. If the lien route is the way we're going, I think that may, and I'm gonna defer to Dustin on this, that may involve more discussion here at the board level, because we also have treated water accounts that are gonna fall into this category. And how do those relate to the governor's EO and whatnot? We're probably gonna have further discussion on that.
All right. And
Hold on, one question.
Go ahead.
That discussion, we need to have the liens in place before June 1st, or June 30th?
Correct, however, we start the process in April.
Okay, so that conversation I think regardless is going to come back to this body in March for discussion for treated water.
And so just for comparison, Aurora, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you have a number of customers and the dollars that's comparable treated water delinquency?
I do. So, there are roughly 2,800 treated water accounts that are delinquent right now, totaling $477,000.
Oh, my God. Wow. Yeah. And so this applies to them as well, which would be a different item. I know that I don't want to vary from this discussion, but that's something to consider. If we don't, either we are willing to say, we'll walk away from that and take it as a loss to the district. Can we charge it to COVID?
Yeah, I was gonna ask that, is that a COVID expense that we can charge off?
You think?
Well, I would think we should, or could, but
fees and fines, but not the bill itself.
So when we say we charge it to COVID, that's a FEMA
it's a major reimbursement.
reimbursement opportunity. We can certainly put that on our bill and send it to the federal government.
Yep.
We don't know whether it would be reimbursed or not, I have no idea.
Well, we could do that, and if we got reimbursed, then we could reimburse the customer, right, if we got the money.
We wouldn't reimburse the customer, because they wouldn't have paid it.
Oh,
Right.
no, I get that, but I was thinking, never mind.
Right.
Keeping in mind that the executive order doesn't alleviate the customer from paying.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
can see where FEMA may fall back on that.
Yeah.
I shared in the committee, I have a situation like this from another government agency where they just stop sending the bill, but you still owe the money. And I go, no. You know, it's like, okay, you just don't have to see the bill right now. So it's kicking the can down the road. And how much do we want to do that?
So ultimately, if we don't act on it before April or do something about it, we have no, we would be potentially foregoing close to $500,000, $480,000.
Yeah, our recourse for collection would be very limited after that.
Yeah, I don't think people would.
So as follow-up, APC heard this item and they directed staff to, or at least I believe I heard that their position was to move forward as we have in the past with notifying all these customers that they are delinquent for their 2020 water. We are going to notify them of that and that they run a risk of not getting 2021 water unless they contact us and make payment arrangements. That was the direction out of APC. We wanted to bring that here and ensure that the board supported that as well. And so that's who we actually have. So in the recommendation, it is to review and discuss the resolution, which we've done, in relation to delinquent 2020 irrigation water accounts and direct staff to start the delinquency notification process as recommended by the Administrative Practices Committee.
Any further board discussion before we ask for public comment? Because I see we have a hand raised. Ashley Overhouse, you want to talk on this subject?
Thank you, Director Beerwagen. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Great. Good morning, board, staff. My name's Ashley Overhouse, and I'm the policy manager at the South Yuba River Citizens League. I actually wanted to just give a comment this morning as a renter and resident of our lovely watershed and community and provide some policy context. So I wanted to thank the staff for bringing this forward. I know that this discussion on delinquency and ensuring that there's no water shutoffs is not something that NID is alone in facing. As I'm sure all board directors know, a couple weeks ago, there was breaking news that California is facing over $1 billion in debt from unpaid water bills. And so I know that this is something that many water agencies all over the state are facing and wanting to know how they're going to address, depending on their community and who is delinquent and what kind of fiscal impact it has to the district. I wanted to mention just a couple things because I know, as you said today, this conversation is going to come back to the district. And I would love to hear more about your thoughts on a couple bills that have been introduced at the California state level that are attempting to address this. So one is Senate Bill 2023, so 223 by Senator Dodd, that says water systems must provide repayment plans of at least 12 months, waive disconnection and reconnection fees for low-income households, and wait until a customer is 4 months and owes over $400 to shut off water, among other protections. He's also introduced another bill, Senate Bill 222, which would set up the Water Affordability Assistance Program that he had envisioned and introduced in 2015. But it does not identify any sort of funding. And I know that there is a deadline for introducing bills in the next couple weeks. But because NID is facing this issue, and we always can use more advocacy for rural districts like you at the state level, it might be worth looking at what version of those bills the Assembly introduces, talking to your state representatives to see what kind of interests NID has to help address any interests that NID needs in terms of language in those bills. And I also know that, President Biden has proposed $5 billion in utility bill aid, but how that will break down and what, will actually benefit NID, right, remains to be seen. So I just wanted to add that kind of policy context in addition to Governor Newsom's executive order, which is now almost a year old. And so I know that you're waiting for state assistance and more direction there, but I was hoping that, that could be brought up when this comes back up in March. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ashley.
Thanks, Ashley.
Anybody else in the public would like to comment on this item? Star 9. Last chance. If you'd like to comment on this item, Star 9. Okay. Who would like to? We need a motion.
Can I just ask one quick question?
Yes, sure. Please go ahead.
So, any of these customers have an option to enter into a payment plan, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so, and that's part of your communication to them, and they've had that option for the past however long.
Absolutely. Even prior to COVID, we've had customers who choose not to pay in the 3 installment model, and they make payments throughout the year. We always work with those customers.
And I have one more.
Director Peters.
And you had mentioned that when we send it out, we'll strongly advocate that they enter a payment plan. But historically, we've said once we cut you off on many of our canals, that's it, you don't ever get back on. And so even though we may not let them know that, but we will hold their place on their canal, or how are we going to address that? Are we going to, if we cut them off now, are we going to immediately assign it to someone else? Or?
That's a good question, and it's not something we really discussed, but you're correct. Historically, if the canal was at maximum and you did not take water, you probably weren't going to get it back. I'm happy to report that most of our canals are no longer at that moratorium level. We've done a lot of infrastructure upgrades, and there's a lot more available now. However, there are a few canals that still are limited. So that's a great question. Perhaps in light of the fact that we're in that COVID emergency regulation, we can maybe reserve their spot, but that's a slippery slope and something we haven't really discussed yet.
Right.
And generally, in practice, if they, for example, were delinquent for 2020, did not start out the 2021 water season, and they were on one of those canals that are in moratorium, and within a month or two, or the same season, bring their account current, say, okay, I'm ready for water for 2021, we work with those customers. There's not been enough time passed to say, sorry, you're out of luck. So we're always trying to work with the customers for what works best for everyone.
Do we know if any of these customers are on those moratorium canals? Do we have that level of detail?
No. We could get it, but we
Because, I mean, they have the same economic challenges as people treat water as well, and so to say, you get hard times, you never get water again, that seems a little rash to me, but I know.
Well, and I should also add that our annual raw water services are not affected by this because that's a public health and safety issue. Our assumption is they're using this in the home year-round, so we're not shutting those off.
So I'd like to make a motion that we direct staff to start the delinquency notification process as recommended by the administrative officer.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded to direct staff. Where does it say? Where does it say that? Oh, there we go.
Second it.
Direct staff to start the delinquency notification process as recommended by the APC committee. Is there any further board discussion?
I have one thing it just occurred to me.
Go ahead.
We have that low-income assistance program. Is it possible that we also let folks know that we do have, if there is a certain income and qualify, that they could potentially draw on some of those funds so that they wouldn't lose their water?
So the answer to that is yes. However, the LIRA program only is offered to treated water folks. It's a public health and safety thing, right? And so, so in order to ensure the human right to drinking water, that's where we put that program in place, was only for the drinking water.
But this may come into play when we get to the treated water.
It more than likely will, and I appreciate that feedback, and it's definitely something we'll have to put in any notification to those customers.
Director Johansson?
Yeah. Am I correct that every $500,000 that we incur in extra expenses really means about a 2% rise in our water rates?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's serious implications.
There are.
Yep.
Now, I had a question building on, or dovetailing on what Laura talked about, the canals that are restricted. Are these people aware that they're on a canal like that? Or is there some way to notify them, or?
That's a good question. They hopefully are. I can't guarantee they are.
Right, so it isn't part of their bill. It says, hey, you have a special circumstance here that you need to be aware of.
No.
Okay.
And I'm going to dive into the earlier discussion that y'all just wrapped up, but I think that maybe that could be one of the KPIs that we report out on operations.
Oh, there you go.
There used to be, 20, 30 canals on moratorium, and right now we're down to just a small handful. So we've made leaps and bounds in that regard, and I think the old discussion of, no, if you cut off your water, you lose it forever, boy, there's just only a handful left that would be under that circumstance.
Prioritize those capital projects.
And they are. That's actually how we prioritize them, is anything that's on a moratorium goes straight to the top of the list.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. All right, if there's no further discussion, Madam Secretary, would you call the roll, please?
Did we ask for? Oh, yeah, we did.
We did. We had it. Sorry.
Division 5,
Yes.
Division 4,
Aye.
Division 3, aye. Division 1,
Aye.
Division
2. Aye.
Thank you, Board.
Thank you, Chip. Thank you,
Debbie.
Aurora.
Thank you, Aurora. Yes.
Okay, next item number 5 is approve the warrants. We have a motion to approve the warrants.
I'll make a motion to approve the warrant.
Okay?
I'll second.
Moved in second. Is there any discussion, board member discussion or questions on the warrant? Madam Secretary? Oh, let's see, now we forget this part. Is there any public comment on the warrants today? Any public comment on the warrants, the star 9? Now, seeing none, Madam Secretary, call the roll, please.
Division 5,
Yes.
Division 4, aye. Division 3, aye. Division 1,
Aye.
Division 2.
Aye. Thank you very much. Next, interim general manager's report.
Okay, thank you.
IGMR.
Thank you, Board. I just have a few items to update you on in the last, since we met. Well, we met a couple weeks ago, and did not have an update, so it's really.
Well, I think we have a handout for that.
Yeah, I gave you a little handout.
Thank you for that.
Broken down by department. So on the administrative side, you'll notice that we have a new website. It's back up and running. We had it up for a little bit, and then had to pull it down and fix some glitches. There's still a few glitches here and there that our IT and staff are working on, so I hope everybody enjoys it. It took quite a while to get there, but I'm pretty impressed with it, and we're happy that it's there. Staff participated in the Consume This American Berry Yuba IRWMP approval process that happened on February 4th, I believe. That plan is on its way to PWR for approval, and it'll come to this board after that 60-day period for adoption of NID, then we become an official stakeholder of the IRWMP plan, and that's fantastic. That's just the way to go. We're engaged with Placer County on the local hazard mitigation plan update. That happens I believe it's every 5 years that it happens. This year's Placer County. And so we're engaged with them right now, along with all other special districts, including the fire department, and CAL FIRE, and everybody else in Placer County. So excited to report on that, and we'll have that, that'll go through the county process by the end of the year. In terms of COVID, and hearing some updates from Nevada County, we, as water, wastewater, we are actually in the phase 1C of the Nevada County vaccine schedule. We requested to be in 1B, but based on the health department requests and requirements, we're in 1C. But I think that's okay, as Nevada County seems to be doing extremely well in their outpouring of the vaccine and as much as they can get. So they're most of the way through, or they're a good way through the 1B category. So as soon as they fall into the 1C, we're in there with various other utilities and other agencies, as opposed to the general population that are not 65 and older. So feeling pretty good about that coming along, and we're just in a wait-and-see game until we hear from them. Then staff at NID will be able to get vaccines if you so choose to get them. January 27th, our retreat. I gave you the printout of that facilitation report that was done by Lori Frank. So you have that printed, and I gave it to you. It's also posted on the website for all the public to see. I'll have that up there. You have also the precipitation and reservoir storage reports listed here. Again, I'll remind you that we started to post these on the website, at least the lake precipitation and the reservoir storage documents. So those are in a couple different places on the website, whether you're on the water tab and drop down under reservoir and river data, or I think it's over on the recreation drop down as well. But in general, and again, we talked about this pretty in depth yesterday at the WHO committee, but precipitation level, this is read every Thursday, so these are updated every Thursday on the website. They might be updated, I might put up on Friday, but the readings are updated on Thursdays. We are at 22.59 inches of precipitation at Bowman Lake, which is 58% of our 134-year average, which is in the blue field there. The reservoir storage, we were at 172,758 acre-feet. That is 87% of our 8-year average, which is the blue category there. So we're still got a ways to go, and we're hoping for some more rain coming up this week. Our treated water usage comparison month over month to our 2013 benchmark. In January of this year, we're below by about 1% of our average usage back in 2013 at this time in 2013. So it being pretty dry, we had a lot of treated water usage in the month of January. Yes.
Next question, board. Do you have any independent surveys? It's just NIDs, no fellows, or do we have staff do that?
So we have a unique item that we spoke about yesterday in the WHO committee, which is called a snow fox. And that is kind of a leading edge technology that NID invested in about a couple years ago. And we have it resting in a forested location up in the high country.
Not disclosed location.
Not to be disclosed.
It cost us a bit of money. But it is a unique document. It's listed on yesterday's WHO committee. So Kian spoke about it a little bit. But that's a kind of it reads water content, it reads snow level, and it gives us the trajectory of historical. But as we develop that historical, it should give us some projection moving forward. Yep.
And we also use Bulletin 120, I would imagine, as well.
I believe so. Yep. So in these items, operations is continuously looking at surplus. We've talked about surplus a couple times today. Right now, we're not at the position where we want to bring surplus water categorization to the board yet. Waiting to see if Mother Winter can come on a little stronger for the rest of the February and March, but that will have to come very soon, and we'll be bringing that to the full board as soon as we believe that we can, but we'll wait and see until some more weather comes. Of course, watching the state for any drought mandates coming as well, so we're trying to keep ahead of anything that the state's doing, but also monitoring for our own needs. We talked about this storm event, and I'll just sort of bundle this in. On January 18th was an incredible storm event up in the high country. It did a lot of damage on the water off side. There was some damage to the South Yuba Canal. You've seen some pictures of that. We talked about that a little bit at the end of January. That canal, is under the maintenance of PG&E, so they were out there and repaired it relatively quick. The problem is a lot of snow fell right after that, and so there's 4 or 5 feet of snow in that canal that PG&E's having to go out and shovel out before they can really kick that thing back on and deliver water. We're okay in terms of our supply at the moment, but we're constantly working with PG&E trying to get that canal re-engaged.
It snowed in while it was dry.
That's correct.
Oh, that's a mess.
And so trying to put water, typically before a snow event, they release 20 CFS just to keep, if snow falls, it just keeps it flowing down. As soon as it gets downhill enough, it's melted and moves on. Well, they shut the water off as soon as they fix the break and never re-engage the water, and therefore snow piled up.
That's a boo.
It was a confluence of all storms. Yeah.
That's,
Go ahead.
I have a question. So is that water that's flowing there, is that NID water? Is it being held, is the water that would be flowing, that we would be releasing, is that our water that's still held up in Spalding, or how does that work?
So I don't know if I have a direct answer for you on that. I do know that our water ops, there is some of the water in that system that we would be utilizing for some of our customers. We're having to utilize pumps at the moment in order to get the allotted water up to the Cascade Shores area, and it's working as intended. There's always an outage of PG&E, so we're always utilizing these pumps at some point during the year. It's not a very large amount of customers that we're talking about here, because it is winter and it's raw water. So it's for those, Chip mentioned, those year-round customers that might use it for their internal purposes. I believe there's, 30 or 40 customers that are actually on the demand side of it right now. So it's not a huge amount. We're utilizing natural runoff to augment the water that's not coming from the South Yuba.
Yeah.
My understanding, the South Yuba Canal is all our water, right?
Well, we're winter. We're in January.
Right, but I mean,
It is the main artery for all. Yeah, it comes down through and comes into Scotch Flat and delivered.
Loma Rica and E. George.
So it is source water for E. George.
Yeah, it's a lot of water from upper part of Connecticut.
I think it's more, we spoke about it a little bit yesterday. I don't know that.
I was just yesterday about the pumping cost.
Yeah, sure, there's a cost for us. And that's why I say we're working with PG&E and they're trying to get it going. They're working on it. We're pushing them on a daily basis to get that fixed and get the water coming through there. The repair is fixed. It's now getting that water through so that we don't have to utilize the pumps on a daily basis. On that same storm event on the hydro side, there were roughly 11 power poles that came down on the Bowman transmission line.
I saw those videos yesterday of those power poles.
And it's incredible.
It was incredible. I wish everybody could have seen it.
It's incredible. It's all up on the website, so people can tune in to yesterday's Zoo Committee, and there's some amazing photographs that happened. But, in particular, that hydro department and the crews were on it. They ran out there. They did an enormous amount of work in such a short time, a couple days, to fill the realignment and reestablishment of 11 power poles in remote area of the country with booms and shovels to get these power poles up before it snowed another 5 feet or 5 feet, right, you know, a couple days later. So kudos to the hydro department for getting on that and getting that power flowing again. And the wind event was just impressive. We're developing our CEQA documentation now in our initial study for the English Meadow development, which is installing in-stream structures for all the work that we're doing for regeneration of the meadow above Jackson Meadows Reservoir. So just wanted to give you an update there. We're working on that, and you'll see that come through as soon as we have determined the mitigation needs on that. Yes?
What kind of structures do you have?
Gauges? Gauges. Yeah, water gauges.
Gauges, okay, so
Yeah.
it's not like, check dams or anything like that?
No, it's not check dams.
Water measurement.
Correct. Yeah,
That's what I want.
yeah, sorry about that.
Okay.
And that work is funded through a grant from the, I forget the name, Water Conservation Board. Wildlife Conservation. There was a question last board meeting that was raised. There was $3,484 on the warrants to the Centennial project, 7031. That expense was related to the rental properties of the Centennial that were in that project related, and roughly $2,153 went to repairs and maintenance of a couple of those properties, and the remainder, $1,331, was management fees in that program. So I just wanted to, that was brought up, and I wanted to bring that back to the whole board. It's just an update. On the maintenance side of it, these are some of the KPIs that, you know, we can be bringing forth to the board as some of this, as on these workshops, informational items, but I've got them here, and in January, we had 76 meter replacements. Typically over the last 6 years, since we've been keeping real data on some of this stuff, we've been tracking it in real time. That's pretty much straight on average for this month of the year, January.
Now, are those the new meters?
Yes,
that
they
we're
are
putting
Badger
in?
meters.
They are the smart meters, okay.
Yep.
And these replacements were, and we proactively are replacing them, they're not because they
Nope.
Okay, that's what I thought, all right, thank you.
Yep. 23 service line replacements. Typically in the last 6 years, we've done about 11 in January. So because of the good weather in January, we were able to go out and notify some of the customers, and this is just, they're not emergency outages, but they're certainly outages for a half a day, on certain service lines within communities that we know that need to be replaced. They're aging, they're old, they're not, there may be a small leak in them, and so we were able to really get out there, and the maintenance department works really hard to get these done. This is straight O&M, repair and replacement of aging infrastructure. So kudos to them for pretty much doubling their productivity over in January. I mean, a lot of it is due to you know, some of the good weather to get out there and do it, but also the coordination between maintenance operations and getting notification to customers and ensuring that these activities can be done quickly. On the vehicle service preventative maintenance, our staff did about 30 different vehicle service repairs over the last month. Typical average is about 20. So again, we're getting a lot of volume. We've got a lot of vehicles, and they're just moving through it. So these are some of this is an element of KPI that I think, you know, can be left to just for your education and you know, engagement. On the engineering side, Alta Sierra Tank Reservoir tank replacement is currently under construction, so that's engaged right now. We've got a contractor on site, and they're working to complete that. Sounds like that's going to be pretty much through the summer and into probably September, October, until that one's totally replaced. Doty North is nearing completion, and we anticipate that's going to be complete by the irrigation season on April 15th. And Combi Phase 1 has been keeping you a short update on that. That's totally on track and, again, ready for water to flow through that and engage before the irrigation season.
Nice.
Oh, great report.
Yeah. Have the customers that are on moratorium on that Doty North, have they been notified this April, their system might get purchase water?
I'll check into that. into that. I'm not positive. We can give it a little lead time. I can look into that. Been waiting a long time.
Thank you.
That's the end of my report.
Thank you, Greg. Okay, next is, go ahead, Kurt.
Grace, I was using my cell phone to access the NID website earlier in the week, and I was looking at the board meetings, and when you go to it has a different interface than the updated website, which, by the way, is a really nice enhancement. Visually, I think it's really nice, and I know how much effort it goes into making a change like that, so I appreciate that. But with a cell phone accessing the website, if you go to meetings, you actually have to change your settings in order to access the current information from the updated website. So,
You have to change your settings in your cell phone.
yeah, because it says, and I didn't even notice it, at the top of the top, actually it was last Friday when I was trying to access to see when the rate committee was.
Yep.
I couldn't see it on my cell phone. When I went home, I could see it, but if the interface is different, and in order to access the current site, you have to change your settings. Yes, and I couldn't find how to do that, so I just said, forget it, I'll wait till I get home, but,
Okay.
I'm just wondering if that will ever be able to be changed so that you're able to it's real-time connection into the website. So, just a question.
Okay, we'll look into that. I don't know the answer, but, I'll ask IT or, to take a look at that.
Okay, thanks.
Go ahead, the Director,
Director Vic. Hey, Greg.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we talked about in our last meeting was for us, board members to receive kind of the upcoming snapshot of what's coming, to the board in the next 2 months, 3 months, whatever. And I just want to make sure that's still on your radar, because it's really helpful to everybody. I would imagine, but it's really helpful to me.
Okay. All right.
Do you agree?
Yeah, it's in my binder. It's in my binder.
It's in your binder, okay.
Yeah, okay. I apologize. Yes, we'll put that.
Oh, gosh, you
we
have
can
so
add
many
that.
other things to do. It's
We can add that
okay.
into the,
I know.
into the list, for sure.
And I was thinking it could be just part of your director's, or, your management report.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
On the agenda. That's how we got to keep it.
Yeah. So anyway, I think it's helpful to everybody. Because as I mentioned, I'm going to be gone for a chunk of April.
Yes.
And it would be really nice for me to kind of go, okay, where do I need to plug in?
Upcoming.
And,
We can certainly do that.
yeah.
Yes, thank you for reminding me.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, Director's reports, items. Who would like to go first? Karen?
Sure, why not, huh? So I participated in the CABI meeting, and I really appreciate, Greg, that I think in the spirit of getting that major effort moving forward, that Centennial was removed from the project list as being a contested project. Made a lot of sense to take that action, and I feel that it made a very positive impact with the NGOs who are part of that group as well as others. So I really want to thank you for that. I also participated with Greg at the Placer County Farm Bureau Board of Directors meeting this month. I met with Allison Lehman, and one of the outcomes of that was the idea of having a 2x2 with Nevada County, and just to see where our connections are between both of our organizations. And Laura and I met this week with Cindy Gustafson, who's a supervisor within Placer County, to talk about commonalities that we have and to hear what their priorities are in their county. And I also visited with Doug Roderick at the Combi Phase 1 project, and that was just amazing.
Isn't that amazing?
Absolutely
Yeah.
amazing. And so I know that was a huge effort. I continue to get customer feedback regarding rates, and so I am tuning into the rate discussion, and just would ask if we could have some kind of structured conversation with the entire board about, the projected budget, and I think you have that planned already, Greg. But also to look, we're looking at, the rates look at the revenue side primarily. I think we need to really take a look at the expense side, and I think that's a full board discussion. And then I also appreciate the fact that you provided us with the notes from the retreat. That's super helpful. And I wondered if at some point we could have a board discussion about the goals, so that those goals get coalesced into some priority and action for us and working with management. That's it.
Okay, if I could respond to Karen's question about because I'm on the rates committee, we do have quite a robust schedule of meetings, and this came to mind as we were talking about information, when and where does the rest of the board come in, and I'm in a conundrum with that, because we did discuss the expenditures I mean, they are on the docket, they were there, and this presentation by the finance department is quite robust, and if you've seen it at all, we have the ability to change the percentages and just click a button, change the model, and there it is. So we did do that, and I was going to include that in my update, but I'll just do it right now, about that idea going forward, how we all get that information, at what time we get it, because this is going to go on until October, right? October is when we have a public hearing so during that time, so proposed Water Rates Committee meets again in March with a specific agenda items each month that are different, but really getting into the weeds there, and I think that's going to be really necessary. That's what I will be most in favor of, getting into the weeds, but how we include the whole board in that's going to be challenging. But then the workshop, the proposed workshop and 218 notice will not be until July 19th on this schedule. So there's you all watch Zoom the whole time, on these meeting days. I think you'll see that we are, it's going to be, it is challenging in my mind how to make that happen for the whole board. So I think we'll learn about that going forward. But I wanted to say that about specifically about the expenses.
Can I respond to that?
Go ahead.
I'm looking at it from a different viewpoint than what I participated in the rates discussion until about 12:15. So I had a little over 3 hours. And what I'm suggesting is a different look at expenses, because there was not really a discussion of how do we prioritize capital projects. During the time I was on the call, so it could have happened later. There was not a look at staffing trajectory. There was not so are we stable on staffing? How we look at the historical rate increases to see, I know that we provide a general overview of why expenses in the district are increasing. But there's still priorities being made and expenses incurred for supporting the capital project and other investments that are needed. I'm just suggesting that we as a board need to understand where there are discretionary expenses, as opposed to, our benefits are going up 9% and this is going up. That's not really, for me, what I'm talking about. I'm really talking about, we got to dive down and see what are those drivers, how do we control those drivers? And I think that's a conversation for the full board. And I think it starts with understanding the foundation of the budget, which, that presentation on Monday was fantastic. And there was a huge amount of effort put into that. I really appreciate it. And it just lays a fantastic foundation for discussion. But again, that's, in my book, that is a full board discussion. And not that you didn't need it also, but we as board members need it.
I agree. This is another one of the situations where the committee serves a certain purpose, but
Yeah.
the greater board needs to be brought in to the bigger discussion.
Yes, it's kind of Dustin's model, you
Right.
know, where
Right.
Yes, right.
the working part goes to the board, or goes to the committee.
Committee, yeah.
Yes, but the board is in tune, so you don't end up in a situation where we're going, hey, we don't support that, we don't understand why you did that, why,
What's
you
that?
know?
So I hear what you say, this is a little out of the parameter of the director's report,
Yeah.
but it's the time to say this is what we think we should do, and I think it's a great idea, a great, segue for me to say, okay, because what I was gonna say was the budget process is gonna parallel the water rates process, and we do get into that. But I don't disagree with your, some of your points you make, they're clearly, they're there, so we will, it sounds like a conversation for a future board meeting
Mm-hmm.
on the agenda.
Agree.
What, the things that you mentioned.
Because
Because I think that most of us are more interested in the areas you're talking about, that we haven't, and I'm specifically on one of those, we talked about the operations department and their budget, and prioritizing in our mind, I have no clue, right?
Right.
What the level should be there, and so, I'll be on it. Thank you for that. Director Peters.
Yeah, thank you. I completely concur with Director Hall on that conversation. It is in the weeds and it's kind of diving deep, but I believe it's our responsibility to do that. And so, especially in the capital improvement, I know, and this goes back to engineering, I listened to the engineering committee, and, you know, there's this Maven 4 canal upgrade, and they're enlarging, they're upsizing pipes. I'm going, well, why are we upsizing pipes? I mean, we haven't seen the justification. Are the developers paying for that upsizing? And the canal, and so we need to understand, historically, we've been presented with a capital improvement plan that says these are the projects we need. 1, 2, 3, 4, you know, these are what we're going to do. But we've never really, as board members, understood why those are the most priority projects. And so, and especially if we're going to be upsizing canals or pipelines, I firmly believe that it's not our ratepayers and taxpayers that should be funding upsizing of facilities without a firm development or developer on hand that's going to pay for that expense. So I completely concur, and I'd like to look at some of these things in a more methodical fashion. So I too attended the CABI meeting, which was fascinating. There was almost 70 people on the line. It was very clear that these very large dam projects, this wasn't the venue to be trying to solicit funds. They have $1 million between, you know, 150 projects, and we're trying to get money for, you know, a very expensive. And so I was, kudos to staff to take that off, and Nathan did a huge lift. I'm really, really pleased with the work that's been done on that plan, and it was really enlightening. Everyone was pretty elated by the end of that meeting that these, and it was just 2 projects that didn't necessarily need to be on there. So I thank you, staff, for taking that off. It was great. I think you did it. So, and then also I attended with Cindy Gustafson at Foster County, learning their priorities. It was very interesting. And I think that's about it. I think that I haven't done a lot more. One thing that if we're, you know, wish list of things to do, I'd like to reverse the order of the boards. Division 5 has been the first to vote for a whole year. I think we should shake it up. That's his call. I know. And I'd like to request that.
Okay.
Other than that, I'm good. Thank you.
Director Heck.
Okay. So I was a third person on that CABI meeting, and yeah, there were 75 people on that. And I also want to thank you, Greg, for pulling Centennial off of that list. I think, like it's already been said, but, you know, that project, whether it should go forward or should not go forward, is a much further decision down the road for this board. But I really felt like it was that was not the proper place for it, and you and I have talked about that over the last number of months. And it was a good faith gesture on the part of NID to pull that out of there, along with EID pulling their Alder Creek Dam out of there. I don't know if however many people know, but these projects that are on that list of 150, again, they only have $1 million in funds. So it showed good faith. It showed our willingness to work with our partners. It showed our willingness to listen to the partners and the regulators and the NGOs and all of those who were involved. And I really appreciated that you did that. And I think it goes a long way to buy. It didn't cost us anything. It'll buy us a lot of goodwill. So it was a good thing to do. So thank you. On the GM search, I just want to report out quickly that they're still in the process of receiving applications. As I sent out a note to everybody, there were 21 received as of whatever that was, a week and a half ago. And the deadline for receipt of applications is February 29th. And we should be hearing within a week or so of February 29th from our consultant as to where we are. 27th. Well, 28th, 27th. Anyway, the end of February. End of February is the cutoff date for receipt of applications. So shortly after that, we should be hearing from the consultant about, next steps. And then lastly, Greg, I also want to thank you with regard to the rates discussion thank you for giving me that model so I can play with it. I imagine that's available to any other board member with the same understanding that it's confidential if it's not, it's not for public production at this point, but it's allowing me to play with it a little bit. So that's it for me. Oh, yes. Oh, great. Maybe you could pass those out. Do you have one for each of us?
I didn't know if you wanted an hour later.
Well, it's not, this is fine.
Come on in.
Thank you, Jana.
Thank you. Now, I believe this is the brochure for the
nicer. And do you have, since you're here, do you happen to have a greater update than what I had about the number of applications and all that?
Not yet.
Not yet, okay.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Janet.
So we're moving forward on so many fronts, and it's exciting time at NID, I think.
Director Johansson. Thank you, Rick.
So LAFCO workshop tomorrow,
Oh, that's right, I'm going to
noon.
that too.
I also met with Allison Lehman, CEO, and Molly Dick, assistant. And they're also looking to collaborate with us on lobbying at the state level.
Yes.
Personally, I'm heartened at the more sensible, responsible approach we're taking with delinquent water rates. The Orland Artois Water District, notice of delinquency and impending sale of property.
Oh,
And we're talking, one guy was $18.10. That's for 2020. So, I'll have to call, I know the treasurer pretty good, so I'll call him. What's going on there?
Cover that guy.
And these guys are all farmers.
Yeah.
So they fit it within the COVID, regulation. Anyway, all right.
Thank you, Director Johansson. Okay, the only item I had, I mentioned earlier, was just on my mind to share with the board and the new board members, specifically the process of legislation, I'll call it that for lack of a better word, because the issue came up recently, and I was the first whole year on the board wondering how the agenda gets established, There was no, it took me a long time on-the-job training to figure out and then to learn how that actually works. And so now being president, I'm really up to speed on that. So the agenda is developed by the staff and manager and the president, and they go over it. They have, like Ricky alluded to, this list of things that are ongoing that they were, and we already have a list of when they might appear on the agenda. Okay, that's one thing. Specifically, it was more what is our opportunity? What is our obligation or our direction? I'm using that word, process, to get an item on the agenda. And I thought that was interesting. It made sense that it's not unlike state or federal government, where a board member or a person introduces a bill, and it goes to committee, and it's, reviewed. First, it would go to the president and the manager for discussion. If they warrant that it's, needs to go forward, then it would go to committee and then come to the board. So any item, anything you folks have, bring it to me or bring it to Greg and say, here's my, and in fact, that's how this one has worked with the committee thing. We've noodled it in discussion around and around and around, and finally said, okay, is this worthy? And we all agreed, yes, it is, and here it is. So there is a process, however, behind the scenes it may seem, there is that. So I'm excited to be involved in that and learn more about that. As I mentioned, I'm about parliamentary procedure a little bit. I was trained in FFA and served on parliamentary teams, so this is near and dear to my heart, parliamentary procedure. And I'm not going to be a stickler about that, but a couple of the things that come to mind, I've seen amending motions and tabling. I already mentioned tabling are procedures we can use, and generally we've struggled with how to amend a motion, right? And the formal procedure of that is to make a motion for amendment, discuss that, have a second, and then discuss it, add it to the motion, and then vote on the motion. So there is a procedure in place. We don't have to muddle around with that. So I encourage that idea just as a streamlining, so that we can, because there is a process in place. And then tabling is the other one that we can table items to, I forget the terminology I've been thinking about all day. I can't remember how it goes, but the table to a definite period of time. So we're going to table this item till the next board meeting. We can do that. It's an official way to do that. Or we can table it. We can say we don't want to talk about this. We just table it indefinitely. And that's also a way to dispense with business. So just a couple of things there that I want to bring out, and moving forward, look forward to. And I thank you all today for a good meeting. I think we were very productive, and look forward to moving these things forward. Thank you. On that note, we are
Adjourned.
No, we're not adjourned.
Public comment on closed session items.
Public comment. Does anybody want to? Do we want to break before we go into closed session? Yes or no? Okay.
Yes.
So any public comment on items to be considered in closed session? That's our last agenda item for today. If you would like to comment on item in closed session, star 9 on your phone or your computer, however you do that. I guess that would be phone.
Seeing none.
And we're seeing none. Okay.
Will there be readout?
What's that?
Nothing. No readout, so this will end our Zoom meeting, since there will be no action, right?
Yeah, there's no, my guess is it'll just be direction given to negotiate.
Yeah.
So I may close the Zoom? Okay.
So we'll be
Closing.
closing the open session, opening the closed session, and ending the Zoom portion for today. And thank you all for participating.